to the 520th meeting of Canterbury Regional Council. Welcome to Peter Joyce and Latita Lum from Te Kakariki and Nicola Wilkie, who are here to present at the public forum. A special welcome to Ray and Marie Goldring and Ken Taylor, who are here today to receive Outstanding Contribution Awards. The meeting will break for lunch after the awards, and we will do the rest of the meeting after lunch from 1 o'clock. The meeting is being live streamed, and actually it's being recorded. It's not being live streamed, but it will go up on the web after we've recorded it. I'd just like to invite our Tumu Taiao, Yayan Cranwell, to offer a mihi, and then I'll invite Councillor Craig Pauling to offer a karakia. Thank you, Yayan.
Ko te me tuatai ki te rukarawa, nōna te timataka, nōna te whakamutuka. Kauri noi anō hoki nāna tātou katoa, mana ki tiaki ka wakatoa. Ka huri au ki a rātou, ko hei au ki te pō, moi roho, ki oki mai, tiraha whakatā. Haptene hono o tātai hono, ki te hukamate, Haptene hono o tātai hono, ki te hukaora, nō reira tēnā koutou, tēnā tata katoa. Mihi a ngai tua huriri ki au koutou katoa, ko rau ko mai tēnei rā, mo tēnei hui, ki raro tēnei whare. Nō reira tēnā koutou. He mihi hoki ki au koutou kua hara mai, ki te kōrero ki a mātou i tēnei ata, ki a koe Nicola, tēnā koe. Koutou ko Pira, rau ko Letitia, ki te hara mai, kōrero ki a mātou katoa, e pāna o koutou mahi, huri no i a waitaha. Ko ki atu ki a koe Ken. Pai ki kiti a koe anō, hara mai, nau mai, koutou, ko Ray, raua ko Marie, e pai aki ki te eo kōrua. Ko kōrua kaha i te whawhai, o ngā mahi ana, hei tapahia ngā rākau, raru, kia tata katoa, ne kōrua, hara mai, nau mai, hara mai, huri no e te whare nei, tēnā koutou. A tēnā tata katoa. Huri au ki te rākau ki a koe kōru. Tēnā koe. Tu o te waka nei. A tēnā koutou. Ka tautuku te mihi a Ian ki a koutou. Ko tāu mai nei. Tēnā koe hoki Ian mo tō karakia i te rungarawa. I ngā mate. Tēnā koe. He karakia timatanga o tātou nei hui. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te toka. Kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi aki ana te atakura, he teo, he hoka, he hauhu, a tihei, mauri ora.
Thank you, Councillor Pauling. I'd just like the meeting to note at the start that there is a late item around the appointment of independent members to the Performance Audit and Risk Committee, which will be undertaking in public excluded at the end of the meeting, and we have a recommendation in there as part of item 10. So just moving on, apologies. We have an apology from Councillor Lan Farn for this meeting. There's no other apologies? No, because everybody's here, so that's good. Conflicts of interest. Are there any? I haven't received notice of any additional conflicts of interest. Councillor Pauling.
Kia ora, Judy. Tēnā koutou katoa. So I'm a founding trustee of Te Kakariki and a current co-chair as well. So, but I haven't been involved in what Peter and Letitia are going to present today, so I'm interested to listen, but I will sit back from the deputation and from the discussion. And also, item 9.2, there's a report from Boffin-Miskell, and I'm an employee of Boffin-Miskell, but I didn't work on that report, but I'll also sit out of that item. Kia ora.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pauling, for telling us about your perceived conflicts of interest. That's excellent. Now we're up to our Councillor Clearwater.
Can I just, I'll move the apologies. And if there's a second.
Well, we don't vote on it. We're not voting on it as part of our standard process, I don't think, Phil. So thank you for raising it. It's an interesting variation on the normal model. Number 4, public forum, deputations and petitions. So first of all, a public forum. We have, first of all, I'd like to welcome to our table Peter Joyce and Letitia Lum from Taiao Kakariki to talk about some information that you've written to us around your organisation. So have a seat, and you've got around 10 minutes. We have a little bell up here. I'm sure we won't, we'll ring it after 10 minutes anyway as part of practice, but and then we might have some councillors that want to make a comment. Thank you very much. Don't forget to turn on your microphone, just press the
Kia ora koutou. I'm Letitia Lum, coordinator for Te Ara Kakariki, and this is Peter Joyce, co-chair for Te Ara Kakariki. Thank you for having us here today. Te Ara Kakariki are a charitable trust, and we're planting green dots across Selwyn, trying to link the Canterbury foothills to the CNT Waihora. This year has been a milestone year for us. We've planted 100,000th native seedling and 100th green dot. So we thank those supporters and partners who came to celebrate with us at Glen Tunnel in September. So we couldn't do anything that we do without the support of our funders, SDC and ECAN this year, and several others. This year, ECAN helped us host a plant out with going to 4 properties, and we planted about 3,000 plants. We involved 130 volunteers at that day and planted 4 green dots. You've also helped us with our school program, the Kids Discovery Plant Out program. This year we planted with 16 schools. There were 2 additional schools that got cancelled because of COVID. But ECAN supported us in kind with Stackwoods Bend planting in Taitapu and at the Willows at West Melton with plants and personnel. And we provided the coordinator and organisation with the school. So this year we have involved about 1,700 volunteers and planted about 22,500 plants. There's a lot more work to be done in Canterbury. We've got less than 1% of native cover, and so like our biodiversity is very threatened, and we would like to keep working with landowners who are willing to plant and give up a bit of their land to provide the greenway. So what we really would like is long-term funding. It's a long-term process, planning, planting. We need to order our plants at least a year ahead, and it's really difficult because each year I'm spending a lot of time organising funds in a rush to get the plants ordered. So yeah, what we're asking is about for support for our Green Dot program and our Kids Discovery Plant Out program. Peter, would you like to continue?
Okay. The trust has been going just over 10 years, and as Craig mentioned, he's the only founding trustee who's still a trustee. And I got promoted to co-chair because I'm the only person in unpaid employment with no paid employment, so I have time for activities. Partly led by Craig, but we've been thinking in the last few years of thinking bigger than just the Green Dots and the Kids Discovery program, which have been our core 2 activities for many years now, and started talking about legacy sites. One of our trustees, in fact, has about 60 hectares up at Springfield, and she would be interested. We're in some early discussions with ECAN, as I think you understand, about planting their Ahuriri Lagoon. It's another one. But taking a lesson from Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust, they have a view that there should be at least 4 1,000 hectare native blocks on the Banks Peninsula, we need to start thinking what needs to be out in the middle of the Canterbury Plains. So if we see legacy sites as 5 hectares, there should probably be one of these every 3 to 4 kilometres so that the birds can fly from a bigger block to a bigger block with smaller trees in between. But I'm sure somewhere in the plains we also need a larger block of native bush. Maybe harder to think of exactly where than for Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust, who are making progress on a number of fronts. Then probably the last key point just like to make is to reiterate point made by Letitia, because for planting next spring we've got ordered plants now, so getting money at the last minute is very challenging without being able to make the long-term commitments, and more all the nurseries are struggling to actually provide the plants that many organisations and individuals would like to be able to plant. So it's that ability to plan, and as a charitable trust it's all short-term grants, and some stability for the long term would be very desirable. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm really impressed by how many plants you've planted. It's pretty impressive, and I saw some photographs of your kids' discovery program with the 16 schools, so that's great work. This is the future generations we need to bring on board, isn't it? So is there any councillor that would like to make a comment or ask a question? Yes, Councillor Sunkel.
Thank you for the presentation. I think we're all aware of the work that the trust has been doing over the years, and I'm involved in funding it through another entity as well. I just asked the question: are you aware of the work that Craig, Councillor Pauling, is leading around biodiversity tree and planting programs? And that's something that I think, as that matures, will be something that will link in, I think, over time to provide those further opportunities. So just wondering if you are aware of the thinking of where the council is travelling, but absolutely recognise the challenge of having to put proposals out to get funding and then source trees.
Craig has made brief mention to us, so we're aware of the existence of this, but we haven't had any detailed discussions at this stage.
Oh, that's excellent, because it just fits in with our vision, so it's fantastic work, and I can't wait to see native plants every 3 or 4 kilometres across the Canterbury Plains. I think it would be very interesting. So who else would like to make a comment?
Just ask that I know Craig has stepped back from the table, but either Craig or someone from that biodiversity table who might like to just to further expand on what we are doing. I have no issue with Craig if he wants to, or Grant.
There's a couple of projects that we're looking at. One of them is called Braided River Revival, and that's from mountains to the sea. So using the rivers as that corridor approach from across the plains. And the Miururaku project that we're looking at the moment is looking at a Canterbury-wide initiative for significant revegetation planting across Canterbury, wherever we can, primarily on public land, but obviously private land as well. So there are 2 projects that we are thinking about in terms of our long-term planning.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Peter and Letitia. Can I just ask you, it's great to hear about the work that your trust is doing, and you referred to the Banks Peninsula Trust too, Peter. I'm just wondering, with the zone committees we have, is that a way that in fact we can ensure that as a council too, we hear more about what your group are doing? Is in terms of, I'm really asking about, should we as at ECAN coordinate the great work that groups like yours are doing? Should we be coordinating that better, or is there anything else we should be doing?
I'm not sure. I think in some instances, charitable trusts have some of the 100 more flexible. It's steep, and obviously you've got to provide that vision of what's necessary for the region. And we have good formal relationships with groups like that. So see regular basis, discuss what we're doing, and we try to understand on each other's partners and one another. And I think we'd be happy to do that with any other things of workshops about so they're not always sure what coordination actually.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. You've got a comment, Ian?
Well, in fact, I think you just answered it. I was going to ask what your geographical constraints are, but you operate within the Selwyn.
Largely with so annual contribution.
Are you restricted to the Selwyn district?
The initial trustee was Ocean to the Alps, Rakaya to the Waimakariri.
That's great. Yvette.
Kia ora, korua, congratulations, you know, on all the mahi that you have been doing, you know, over the years. So just want to acknowledge all that mahi that you've been doing. And my whanauka as well, even though he's away from the table, I can say it, that in terms of looking at those pockets of bush, he's looking to the day that he can start to harvest himself alongside the manu from all of those pockets. So I'm waiting to see him actually do that as well. I do have one question though. I work with Kakariki, just after your name, in terms of the Orange Front. And one of the visions is to have the Kakariki back on the plains. And that is the vision of Ngaitahu as a Tonga species, that we want to have it come down from the Hiranui, the South Branch, and have it where it belongs. So your pockets are really important. And I'd like to know, in terms of the planting that you're looking at, heading towards the highland, into the South Branch, meeting up where the plains meets, if you're looking at habitat for our kakariki karaka in terms of, because they're whole dwelling birds, and even though, you know, we think of fern, our native fern panga, we can only get so many eggs within there. So yeah, just like to know a little bit more about the habitat.
Yeah, so we aim to plant the plants that were originally at the sites. We work closely with our ecologists to do restoration planning for land owners. So we're planting the right place, right plant in the right place. I know the kakariki, they feed on, I think, matagari among others, and there's all the beech trees for nesting, and but yeah, we just need time for those to be bigger, and I'm sure they'll come. Yeah.
I think they're adding to that, because often think about that issue, how do we get the kakariki back? And certainly if I drive from our place in Taitapu out to Arthur's Pass, sort of, as you go out to Springfield, it's sparse enough, but from Springfield to the mountains, there seems to be nothing. And we haven't really gone much further north than, or west than Springfield at this point in time. But I think to have some long-term plan now, how to link the valleys onto that plains would be a very good idea, but I think that's quite a big undertaking.
Thank you very much. Megan, did you have a quick comment?
Just, I'll keep it brief because we don't want to take too much time, but thank you very much for coming in and thank you for all the work that you do. The Trust does awesome work. I find myself frustrated every time we have groups like you who are coming in and doing real work that actually makes a difference for our environment, that we're entering a period where we're going to have to spend on more regulation rather than on being able to find lots of funds to fund projects like your own. So that's the real tension that we have come long-term plan, which I'm sure you're aware of. But I'm certainly supportive of the work that you do. But we have some big challenges ahead of us as councils throughout the whole country around expenditure on good projects that get biodiversity back versus writing more rules that won't necessarily get us to the outcomes we want to. So thank you for the work you do, keep it up, and I hope we can find a solution for how we might continue to fund in the future while also having to fund other regulatory processes.
So you're asking for an annual grant, a long-term annual grant. Would you be able to tell us sort of how many years for, and perhaps more importantly, per annum, what sort of amount are you needing?
How long is a piece of string? I guess our planting is limited by the windows within which we can plant, the number of volunteers we can get, and I guess some confidence that we've got the money to buy the plants, and that always takes time. If it was a larger amount, then that means we could probably coordinate bigger plantings with more certainty, but any contribution would be appreciated.
All right, thank you very much. Well, I think that we'd all like to see more plants planted. The whole community, everybody's turning out and wanting to plant plants. So we're working on it in here, and I'm sure there's lots of people and organisations around New Zealand working on that at the moment. But in particular, we would like to come and work alongside you as part of our program, and that's something that that Councillor Pauling's working on and others in the room. So we're looking forward to extending that relationship where we can. So thank you for coming to talk to us. In the meantime, we're going to request that Council receives your request, and we're going to regarding including in the council's long-term plan an annual grant so that their public meat planting and student activities can be supported, and we're going to refer that matter to our chief executive, and you'll get a reply from that. So who would like to move that resolution? Moved by Councillor Clearwater, seconded by Councillor Tane Apanui. All those in favour, please say aye. That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we'll just say thanks for coming, and if you want to stay for a while, you're most welcome, or you can stay for lunch and go away and come back. So just whatever you like. We're having lunch about 12 o'clock. Thank you very much. Our next person is an apology who was going to come to the public forum. So we're moving on now to the Outstanding Contribution Awards. During this process, I'll just tell everybody what happens first at the start of the process. I'm going to welcome the award recipient, and then I'm going to read the citation, or Deputy Chair, Councillor Peter Scott will read the citation. We will invite councillors to speak if they'd like to, and we'll invite you to speak if you'd like to, just say a few words. Then we'll present the certificates that we've got here for you, and then we'll take your photos. And then after that, we'll ask you to stay and have lunch with us. So it might take a wee while but lunch is sort of aiming around 12 to 12:15 maybe. So we don't want to rush too much because it's really important. So that's the process that we'll go for. So first of all, I would like to welcome Marie and Ray Goldring to the table. So Marie and Ray, if you'd like to come up and sit in the chairs, that'd be great. We'll get the process started. So just have a seat there. No. They're actually really comfy chairs, so you'll be good. And help yourself to a glass of water if you like. And for a start, I will read out some words, or I will say some words about your wonderful work, the reason why you're getting this award. So today it's a pleasure to welcome you in recognition of the outstanding contribution you have made to conservation in the iconic landscape of the upper Waimakariri River. We wish to formally acknowledge your work as citizens and individual citizens, working closely not only with us, but the wider community landowners, government organisations, and everyone possible across the upper Waimakariri River Basin to achieve the outcomes of tackling the wildling pines. So we all know that wildling pines were planted, that the contorta pines were planted about 50 years ago. The reason they were planted was to try and control erosion. But what has happened is that they've spread out of control across the whole of the upper Waimakariri River Basin. And the reason that they've spread is that because we know that the contortas in particular have about 17,000 viable seeds each year, and those can spread by the wind as far away as 20 kilometres. Unfortunately, opportunities to deal with the wilding pine spread were overlooked for a number of years, and basically until they got out of control. And what they do is they threaten the biodiversity in something like, in this particular area 60,000 hectares of publicly and privately owned lands in the upper Waimakariri Basin. So in 2008, the Waimakariri Ecological and Landscape Restoration Alliance was formed. Members represent local landowners and lessees being, in some circumstances, the owners, University of Canterbury and Flock Hill Station, and ratepayers, Castle Hill Village residents, Department of Conservation, Environment Canterbury, Canterbury Environmental Trust, the New Zealand Conservation Trust, and individuals like yourself. And I understand that Ray was appointed as the chairperson from the beginning, and he's held that volunteer position ever since. For the past 12 years, the Alliance has continued to be a driving force and a valued partner in progressing the outcomes of the Canterbury Pest Management Strategy and the Selwyn-Waihora Zone Implementation Program in the control of wilding pines. The Alliance has been instrumental in securing over 6 million of funding from a variety of sources to be a major stakeholder and the largest wilding pine initiated program in New Zealand. Of course, it's an ongoing process because the pines regenerate really quickly. So every 3 years, something has to be done to knock off the little ones that have come up all over the place. And I understand that you've both been very involved in coordinating volunteers to come up and handpick the seedlings. Ray takes them to the site, the Champion Club people that volunteer, takes them to the site, does a health and safety briefing, and then talks about the importance of conservation of our iconic natural landscape and species. You are also members of the Canterbury Environmental Trust along with the New Zealand Conservation Trust, and have been operating a volunteer trapping program in the Craigieburn Ranges with over 350 traps for the last 10 years. So you've certainly been extremely active in the area. And Marie, I understand that you were on the Selwyn-Waihora Zone Committee for 7 years until your retirement from that zone committee in 2018. I understand that you were the backbone of the Zone Committee's Biosecurity Subcommittee, working hard with the biodiversity officers to progress a well-supported and strategic immediate steps biodiversity program targeting the Horata catchment. I think that truly must be a very big passion of yours, and that's fantastic work to contribute to our community. Marie, I understand that as part of that work, you made a significant contribution to our Selwyn-Waihora ZIP, and we all know what intense work that's been and what a great contribution you've made. So I think the success of your model is really interesting for other communities in dealing with this problem, like what's happening in the Mackenzie Wilding Tree Trust. They have looked to the work that you've done, early work around the contorta pine control, and modelled new work around that. I know that recently you've retired and you've gone to live in Geraldine, I understand, and that you're already part of a Trapping Alliance Trust. Pardon? Oh, part-time. An Alliance Trust, you're involved in another Alliance Trust now in Geraldine, and you're working to set up a trap library as part of that trust. So that's absolutely fantastic. So sincerely, we want to thank you both for your commitment to conservation of our iconic landscapes and our biodiversity. And we're looking forward to more work from you as well, but we want to give you an award today for this work. So now I'll open it up to the councillors around the room, and some people might like to make some comments. I'll just sit down first. Grant.
Thinks that your citation is impressive in terms of your contribution to helping ensure that our outstanding natural landscape in Upper Waimakariri is really looked after, and it's identified in our regional plan, and it's really an important place. And those threats, man-induced threats, human interventions that we are endeavouring to try to keep under control, and your part sounds really, really interesting. I was wondering, is there a particular part of the work that you're doing that you need more help on, or you think there might be more effort required?
We're fortunate in as much that the central government has given us a considerable amount of money now. So our role in raising funds has diminished slightly, but we are the gatekeepers, and we ensure that, and we had a meeting just the other day to make sure that the program is on track, and that what we wish to achieve is going to be achieved through this extra funding that the government has given us. So, but at this stage, the volunteer program is going well, and the contractor program is going very well because of this extra funding. So I think, and there is an endpoint, and I think, you know, we've always known that endpoint to be there, and as a result of that, it's given us the impetus to keep our energies towards making sure we achieve that goal.
Thanks. Any more comments? Councillor Sunkel, John.
Thank you. I was on the Waihora Zone Committee when Marie came in to replace Eugenie Sage. And for me, what Marie brought was a practical and a pragmatic approach to environmental matters that at one point we were talking at a very high ideological level, but not really achieving anything. And I guess Marie and Ray's passion for that environment around Castle Hill and the Upper Waimakariri with Wilding Pines has, I guess, today shown us what can be achieved by being practical, by being pragmatic, and just absolute dogged determination to see things through. And Marie, your role on that zone committee was one of bringing, I guess, sides together in a sense, and where people could understand and recognise and be part of a program. So I thank you and congratulate you on this award for what you did achieve in that space, and it was part of the, I guess, the maturation of the zone committee as we worked forward and came together.
Thank you, John. Yayan.
Tēnā kōrua, tautoko ko ngā kōrero here, John. Just support what John says. I was lucky enough to be with Marie on the Waikirikiri Waihora Zone Committee. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I learned so much from you, Marie, and your understanding of the Upper Waimakariri Basin, and also on our field trips and our zone committee trips around there, and just your commitment to that work up there. So nō reira tēnā koe. And to you, Ray, or to you both, for your work in Walra, and also your submissions not only to the annual plan, long-term plan, but also to the pest management plan. And that's your submission there really helped us to come up with the rules up there, and also hopefully that helped with the eradication of the
the Wilding Pines up at Castle Hill and around the Craigieburn area. And every time I drive through there, I think of you both, and then think of the not only the fight, but what you two had to go through as in the community up there to actually to win the right to eradicate those Wilding Pines. And then so thank you both for your commitment and your dedication to that work. And I'd just like one comment, Ray. You talked about an endpoint. How far away is that endpoint, or do you think with the funding we have, we can achieve that endpoint?
Yeah, we can achieve it quite easily. We think definitely within the next 10 years. This year, the funding is going to get rid of all the seed source trees, and of course, as soon as you get rid of the seed source trees, then we're doing the mop up of the seed that's in the ground yet to germinate. And as soon as they put their head up above the grass level, we'll give them a couple of years to make sure there's nothing left coming behind it, and then we'll take them down, and that should be it.
And that should be achieved. That should be achieved at that stage if the volunteer program can keep going, which we're very grateful to Ali for, whose idea it was to set this up. And if we can continue that maybe spasmodically over a period of those years, we may not need to get any contractors in just by using volunteers, which we should add has been just a godsend. They've been amazing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm very interested, Ray. I'm told that you found a really rare dinosaur age grasshopper in Broad Stream. Do you want to tell us a bit about that? Wasn't you? That's what
Yeah, it was found by
Simon Morris.
Simon Morris. Yes.
David Hewson, an ex-member of ECAN, operated a program in that area of Broad Stream to eradicate the wilding pines, and that was one of our very earliest projects because they were starting to threaten the Broad Stream watercourse, where the habitat of the grasshopper.
And so we're continuing with the funding with that. We've had the LINS staff go and have a look, and there could be some money coming from them to continue the protection of that grasshopper,
which included trapping.
I think there's one thing I'd like to say before we continue, is that this has been a team project which was initiated by David Hewson, and over the years the staff members have supported us, the ECAN staff members have supported us right throughout this program, and both with funding and in kind, and their own enthusiasm to get it through. And these include Ali, Steve Palmer, Graham, and David Hewson when he was there. And I think you need to be congratulated on the way in which you've supported this program. It's made our job so much easier and so much more achievable with the effort that's gone through Environment Canterbury.
And we hear reports of other areas struggling because they don't have the same unity and the same cooperation from the regional council. So the long 10, 12-year history of this project is success is largely due to ECAN having our backs, and DOC, who've been implementing the program.
It certainly is a very good story about how institutions like us and elected members can work with the community, together with the community, to empower everyone. So it's fantastic. And before I give you the award, I'd like to invite our CEO, Stephanie Rexetta, to say a couple of words.
Thank you, Chair. Tēnā korua, Ray and Marie. I actually wanted to say the part that you're talking about just now, and that is the phenomenal partnership between staff and yourselves. It's easy to be in one place, perhaps in a bureaucracy and thinking about theory, although we have an awful lot of practice. What makes it real is the partnership and the relationship through you and our communities. And I know, speaking on behalf of our staff, that they have utterly valued your insights and contributions over this period of time. And like others around the table, I had the privilege when I was Director of Science to be affiliated with the Waimakariri Te Waihora Zone Committee. And Marie, may I say that your intellect, your compassion, and your connectedness with community made such a difference on a number of occasions. And it's precisely people like you that make our region better. So on behalf of us as an organization, I'd like to thank you both for your long-term commitment.
Thank you very much. All right, well, on to the next award. We'd like to invite Ken and Vicky Taylor to come to the table. If you'd like to come up too, Vicky, you're most welcome. Come and have a seat. Oh, I'm told you have to, but I don't really agree with that. So just sit there if you want to. I'll hand over to our Deputy Chair, Peter Scott.
Tēnā koe, iti rangatira e Ken, tēnā koe Vicky. Nei te mihi atu, ki a koe mō tō mahi. Welcome, Ken, for this presentation to you. And I was just thinking when we handed out the certificate just then that it seems such a small token, but what you need to do with this is stick it on your wall, because it then becomes part of your story. And as people see it, they can ask you the questions that you need to supply really in-depth answers, Ken. You'll be up all night with some of it. I could really just say, well done, Ken, thank you very much. Are there any questions? But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to push on. And I've been given this piece of paper, and then I've scribbled on it. And there's all lots of highlighting on it. So it might be a bit disjointed, but I'll get through it. And I hope to highlight some of the things that are significant to ECAN that you've done and that are significant nationally. To some extent, we stand on your shoulders with some of the work that you've been doing, Ken. And this organisation, when you were here, went through some groundbreaking stuff through 2010, 2016. It's my pleasure to give you this recognition on behalf of Environment Canterbury, and also to look at some of that national stuff that you have done. You started work in North Canterbury in 1984 with the North Canterbury Catchment Board. And one of the early pieces of work that you did, which is still enduring today, is that contact recreation water quality work in North Canterbury. And that work continues, and I'll talk about that again as we get towards the end. And in 1996, one of the other highlights was you edited a substantial tome on Te Waihora, and there's still a wonderful reference book and still used today about the lake, and set and trained a long involvement with ECAN around Te Waihora. In fact, that work's gone on. You must be pretty proud to see where we've got to today with that, and there's still plenty to do, obviously. One of your quotes, Ken, that they've got here is good governance needs to include strong leadership, commitment, shared vision, and the ability to collectively see the big picture. And that helping create this co-governance kaupapa has been a career highlight of yours. So congratulations on that. That will endure. Another big piece of work that we still talk about today, and we're still heavily involved in, is the CWS process. And you were one, excuse me, you were one of the architects of that back in 2008. You played a key role in developing and implementing CWS, and particularly in making sure science was used in the water quality and water planning work that was put through the CWS. Another highlight, good management practice, Ken, which is something that we do again today, and as a cornerstone in terms of a farm environmental planning process that we have, and now nationally acceptable as a way to look forward in terms of seeing if those people that are stewards of our land are doing the right thing. So Ken led the work with the primary industry to develop good management practice, guideline for farming, the matrix of good management projects, which was about translating GMP, good management practice, into numeric limits or plans. This was a hugely complex project involving multiple science agencies and industry partners. It's fundamental to what we do today, as I've already said. Maybe one of the things you want to forget is your involvement in air quality in terms of leading some of that work. And I've said here, Ken, that probably one of the things you want to forget is fronting up for ECAN at some public meetings that got a bit rowdy in Christchurch. And I can tell you today, I was the air portfolio councillor since 2016, that has been a hugely successful project and has moved on. And in fact, we've made such big gains in that, in that whole area. We lead the country in that. So another thing you should be proud of. There's lots of things here. And you also, since leaving us in 2016, you took on the challenge of director role of our Land and Water National Science Challenge. Made sure the challenge is well grounded with stakeholders and a key leader in ensuring Te Ao Maori is heard throughout the challenge's work, also that science is co-designed with partners. So that's something that we attest to all the time in terms of involving other people. At a national level, Ken has been hugely influential in water management work, which has included leading the regional council sector and national project that led to the Ministry of the Environment guidelines on contact recreation in 2003. That work for you started really, really quite early. So you're a bit of a groundbreaker there in terms of that, getting that. And I think that's the basis. I might be wrong with that, of the LAWA stuff that people now refer to during the summer when they want to go on holiday. It's a great resource in terms of where they can go without getting into trouble. You led and developed the National Objectives Framework. That is a core part of the limits specified on the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management, which is a massive piece of work that we've had to look forward to in the next 2 to 3 years here. This work was done for the Ministry of the Environment and was another one with highly complex issues and working across a wide group of scientists and policy people. And I think that attests to your personality, Ken, your ability to do that. We can talk about it, but there's very few people that can actually pull it off. And you've pulled it off over a number of things that I've mentioned already. You're a key contributor to the Land and Water Forum, being the lead spokesman for regional councils, ensuring the National Objectives Framework sat well with the forum. I think Ian McKenzie, one of our councillors, worked with you on that, and he attests to the good work that you've done there. NPS 2020. You chair the Science Technical Advisory Group and provide science advice to the Minister for the Environment for the latest National Policy Statement on Freshwater Management 2020. And that seems like 3 lifetimes worth of work to me. I mean, I couldn't get through one of those things probably. You retired, Ken, as a director role of our Land and Water National Science Challenge in March 2020, immediately prior to COVID lockdown, and settled into a new life, looking after grandchildren, which is probably the most important piece of work you've got to do. Not all that other science stuff. The wee ones are the ones that we need to look after and provide a better future for. And it says here, I know this is not correct, but it says here, working on his crib in Central Otago. I'm informed that you're not working all the time. You're down there, Ken. I know your workmate from down there, and there's a fair bit of relaxation goes on, which you well and truly do. Look, congratulations on your achievements with us. Your legacy is secure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, maybe you'd like to speak, Ken, as well, and we'd ask any councillor to make a comment. So, do you want to speak first? Have a week to speak, or do you want to, whatever you want to do?
Well, I can't let an opportunity like this with a captive audience. Well, I see you've got new microphones, but there are really just kind of, I suppose I just want to say that one's career doesn't sort of kind of develop in isolation. It's hugely shaped by the people that you're interacting with as you go through it. And I guess there are three groups in that regard that I just want to take this opportunity to thank. So I've got I've got this mental list that goes VGC. So that's just to help me keep on track here. But the V stands for Vicky, who that's really good to have here today. And the fact is that especially working the sort of long hours, sometimes into the sort of long days, into the early hours of the afternoon. Nights away in Wellington, on a regular, irregular but frequent kind of basis, and sometimes that was happening every week. Those sort of things don't happen without impact on your family, and I'm really grateful for the sort of support and tolerance Vicky and the kids have shown me, over a number of years that allow me to do that. So I really appreciate that. G stands for governance, and I was interested in that quote you read out, Peter, about something I must have said about governance a while ago. But in terms of my career, I have been really fortunate in that that I've had bosses and governors, whether they're councillors or commissioners, who at the very least have tolerated some of my enthusiasms and my involvement in say national policy work, but for the most part have really actively encouraged and supported me, and that's been hugely helpful to know that you have kind of that support back home when you're sort of flying the flag in the capital, which I've got to know pretty well. And thirdly, C stands for colleagues, and it's actually great and humbling to see you guys around here today, because I've been absolutely blessed with fantastic staff all my working career, and I've always been fortunate to work with people who are supportive, who want to solve problems and do stuff, and I think have really helped me achieve the things that I wanted to do. So thanks to all of you. Yeah.
Thank you, Ken. John would like to say words. Councillor Sunkel.
Thank you, Ken, and really great to be here and recognise what you have given to us as a council, to Canterbury and to Greater New Zealand. I just want to concentrate on a few things, and I guess I first had contact with you in the early days of the Selwyn Waihora, and I came into that zone committee in a binary world because I knew everything, and black was black and white was white. And we were talking about Te Waihora, and I guess what the comment that's resonated with me all the way through is that Te Waihora is a non-linear space. Hope the lake, as you said, and we have no bloody idea what is going to happen. And so that took me from that binary to that challenge space of recognising that whatever we think, whatever we do, there will be those non-linear responses and therefore outcomes and processes. We just have to really widen our view. And another was in borrowing your PowerPoints that you had taken to the world, and I further took to the world and around the place. I thank you for that. But in that, talking about the iterative processes of where we come with the CWMS and the suck and see of going, this is how a community collaborates, comes together, how we take science, and we're science informed, not necessarily led, because we have the four well-beings, and we need to be able to take everyone on a journey, which was again part of your philosophy of taking out of silos and having that wider conversation. And I guess just those things that have really helped me develop my thinking and coming along. That we folk at this table won't agree that I think, but I thank you for the trust and what you gave to us in those early days of, I guess, of understanding the challenges of science and the iterative process that we live in. So thank you.
John, clear.
Thanks very much.
Just the support that you've provided to Ken to be able to do what he's done.
I can vividly remember my first meeting you, Ken. It was in the Commodore, and it was around probably 2008, early 2008, and Environment Canterbury was thinking about how they were going to move out of a regulatory space into the collaborative space. And I remember I was one of the few community people sitting around the table, and I was brave enough to say, "Oh, we're going to have a double-headed monster now." And you were just taken aback that some female probably even could actually say that at the table when they'd been invited to participate in a working group. But it did help shape my way forward as well. And certainly I'm very, very strong supporter of the CWMS and the strategy and the collaborative process. And I know that has been very dear to your heart as well. So that has certainly shaped where I've come, and I have shifted from that very, probably colleagues wouldn't say so either, but I've certainly shifted too from a view to meaning that we do have to have conversations widely to get on the travel of direction we want. I also, like John, I did actually use some PowerPoints, so maybe somebody in the building was providing them, because I do know I do know that I actually also used some PowerPoints for some presentations that had come via you. But yeah, look, thank you. Just wish you all the best for your future, and it's not the end of the world, and I know you'll take a keen interest in what's happening. Congratulations.
Thank you, Claire. Ian.
Look, I just wanted to support the comments Peter made when he read out your citations, Ken. You've truly been a rangatira in the water and environment space, and for a while there, when we were in Wellington together, we probably spent more time together than we did with our wives, which is a scary thought. And I also learned things like acronyms, so LORF and NOF and MGM and various other things. I guess the point I want to make is that when I served with Ken on the Land and Water Forum, and then he made me sit on the National Objectives Framework Reference Group, which nobody has any idea what we did except for Ken and the people who sat on the NOF reference group. And that was populating the attributes within the first MPS of fresh water. And Ken had to chair he chaired that and chaired it superbly. And so he not only had political interference, he also had to corral all our best freshwater scientists into coming up with advice to the reference group. And I think the fact that Ken is so highly regarded in his field, that he found that no difficulty. And he not only was able to deal with the scientists, he was also able to explain to me in layman's terms what the scientists said, which I thought was quite something. So I think that's testament to him. And then of course, he chaired the Matrix of Good Management, which Peter referred to. As Peter said, that was hugely complicated, and the more work you did in going into the Matrix of Good Management, the more complicated it became. And yet Ken was still able to draw sensible and pragmatic conclusions from all that amount of work. The only thing I'm concerned about is that Ken told me when we got to know each other better that he was behind me at Lincoln. I mean, much cleverer than me, but behind me at Lincoln, and he's retiring, and I still seem to be working. But I imagine the fish in the Maniatoto will never be more bothered now. So thank you, Ken.
Okay, just quickly, you gave a talk or a presentation to council earlier in the year about the recent work you've been doing. It's an inspiring piece of work, especially the view of how we can move forward on land typing, catchment management planning, and more focused on sort of smaller scale initiatives over time. So that really resonated with me. So thank you for that presentation.
Thank you. Megan?
I think almost everybody has taken up everything I was going to say. I first remember meeting Ken as a Lincoln University student, and then later into my career working in the industry, environmental consultancy, then at Dairy NZ through all of those projects around MGM and then the conversations going on in farmer meetings and plan changes, and now as a councillor seeing Ken around and bumping into him in all sorts of different forums all the time. But for me, I think everyone's made all the comments that I would have made in terms of thanking you for the work that you've done, Ken. But I think the other thing that really comes through really strongly for me is that I hope that we can continue to build on your legacy, and particularly that legacy around taking the community with us and ensuring that we hold on to that in terms of the principles that you've always talked about around achieving the science outcomes and using the science as we move along, but also recognising that there's a big picture here as we do governance and as we try to achieve the outcomes we all desire. So it is my hope that as we continue, we always remember that. That's why I sort of position at this table. And so I thank you again, and go well in your retirement. Enjoy the fish.
Thank you. Was there anybody else wanting to speak? Ian.
Just one thing I forgot to say, and this is more a tribute to Vicky, because while we were in Wellington doing all that water stuff, you were dealing with a munted house and all the stress of shifting houses and dealing with stuff, because Ken was never there. So.
I'm a bit forgetful, so I'm sorry about that.
She's only consistently forgetful about me, but I won't take it personally. We've got an inside joke about it. Kia ora koutou, Ken and Vicky. I want to focus on the people. When I stepped up into the role that you left, Ken, as Director of Science, you were nothing but generous with your time, your talent in terms of the background as well as your intellect. And what you left in terms of the role that I stepped into was a formidable science group, an incredible team of people. And when people said to me, oh, wasn't that Ken Taylor's role? I regularly said, yes, and I'm not stepping into his shoes because that's not possible. I have to walk next to them. And now we have a new Director of Science. And that director too has been part of your whānau for quite some time. And all along, the key thing you have done is create relationships. And those relationships build trust. And that trust created change. It is rare for an individual to have such a large contribution. And you are someone who does not like us to mention that. But this is that moment, Ken. And from us and from the science group and all of us within Environment Canterbury, thank you wholeheartedly. Hei tangata, hei tangata, hei tangata.
On the minutes, on the agenda on page 11, which is the minutes, ratifying the minutes from the last meeting, I will note that there's a few typos that we've noted, and that what we're doing is confirming the minutes subject to the typos which will be corrected, which you've all very diligently noted to the secretary. Was there anything else anybody wanted to raise about the minutes? All right, I'd like a call for a mover. Moved by Councillor Nicole Marshall and seconded by Councillor Peter Scott. All those in favour with confirming the minutes, all paid aye. Yes, thank you. I'm getting a bit muddled here. That's carried. Number 7, we're up to item 7, matters arising. Any matters arising?
Yeah, I was just wondering, those 2 deputations that we had at our previous meeting, what's being done to follow those up?
Ask the CEO to respond.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, I have 3 updates since the last council meeting. One is a letter that went to Ms. Prue Stephen QC with regard to the Lower Waitaki River Rating District, thanking her for the deputation, but also the written transcript of what she spoke to on the day. In addition, on the 11th of November, we sent a letter to Mr. Ken Rouse and Ms. Annabelle Hasselman, chairs of the Apawaho Heathcote River Network and the Cashmere Stream River Care Group. We provided information with regard to the engagement that we have, including what's on your agenda today, Council, in item 9.6 with regard to the Community Waterways Partnership, and we encouraged them to submit on the LTP. And then lastly, for councillors' interest is that we have also provided a further update to Ms. Vanessa Van Hoof and her students Te Ariki and Lucy from Cashmere High School, who presented to us with their petition with regard to the bus interchange, and the Te Reo Māori. We have been able to update that. It is still not to full satisfaction. Our two-year team have been working with the bus team in that space, and we know there's more work to do, and a future provider and the way we might work will deliver that. But we provided them an update on that on the 27th of November. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to item 8, committee reports. First item is on page 23. I'll ask Councillor Sunkel to proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as the first order of business, can I ask that those members of the Audit and Risk Committee that are here today, could someone please, if they are comfortable, move that those be a true and accurate record. Thank you, Ian McKenzie. Thank you, Grant. Second. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Those minutes are now confirmed. I will take the minutes as read and the attached financial documents, given the time that we have today. But I would like to just make a comment on the first report that we received on risk and health and safety. And Matthew Bennett pointed out to us that on the day, it was the 10-year anniversary of Pike River. And in that health and safety report, we had the opportunity with Matthew's help to I guess reflect on where health and safety sits today in our society, why we as an Audit and Risk Committee take such a particular interest in such matters, and why this organisation drives health and safety, which is all about our people and the community that we support. So I just wanted to highlight the fact that we took that time to understand why health and safety and risk is such an important part of the thinking of the Audit and Risk Committee and where we're at. And thank Matthew for bringing that to our attention and that conversation. Are there any questions?
I have 2 questions. The first is related to the portfolio performance report on page 27. It says David, Caroline and Jesse reported on progress made on performance meters and levels of service. I was just inquiring if at this stage we're flagging any that we have concerns about our ability to meet, and also on levels of service, what we've done since our findings in the annual report that we didn't meet a number of levels of service last year, and what we're doing to make sure we can meet them this year.
As far as I'm aware, we are now on track again. The issues that were flagged in the annual report were COVID related. We accepted that we could not, the auditors accepted that we could not, but because they were somewhat material, they were indicated. The other matters that the auditors had concerns about that were material have been acted and actioned. So everything that has come through that report has been actioned or is being actioned.
Thank you. And just the second question, page 33, the graph on the bottom right shows the cash and bank balance against previous years. I'm just getting clarification on why our balance is so high.
That is a matter of timing. Monies that have come in from central government for projects and the like that are sitting in the account, expenditure will catch up in time.
Thank you. So we've moved the resolution.
You can move the resolution.
I'll move the resolution that the council receives and confirms is correct the minutes of the committee, which have now been passed, receives the summary of the financial reports for the period ending the 30th September and notes the resolutions made by the council under delegated authority. I've moved that, seconded by John. Open for discussion. Yes, Ian. Oh, you were seconding it. Okay. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
That's anyone against? No, that's carried. Thank you all very much. We're now going to page 34 of the agenda, item 8.1.2. Over to you, Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will take this paper as read. I would just note that the minutes that are all there, particularly the minutes of the 26th of November, are now confirmed. I would also like to bring to the attention of councillors sitting around the table and others that we have spotted an error on the minutes from the meeting on the 29th of the 10th. The decision-making part of it is actually correct, and the heading of the item 7.2 is actually incorrect. It says Fulton Clothing when it should have been Mayfield Hines scheme. So that will come back to the Regional Hearing Committee at its next meeting, just to be noted that that correction needs to be picked up. Ironically, our eagle-eyed scouts are sitting around the table have missed that, but we got the item prior to that which had to be amended. So our apologies for us slipping up there. Like, I think probably out of those 3 lots of minutes, the important issue that I just want to bring to everybody's attention was the discussion that the committee had around the committee itself hearing notified non-heard consent applications sitting on a panel. Currently, the Regional Hearing Committee has existing delegations to do that. In the previous term of council, it was done for those specific applications. And up until now, we haven't done it, but the committee has actually looked at reviewing that and renewing it, and has come to the decision that we are advising this council that we will partake in those existing delegations. So it's really bringing it to people's attention. They want to see all the options that were considered and brought to us by our council. That's in the agenda papers for the 22nd of the 10th. And I think there was 7 or 8 options which the committee actually considered, and then we've arrived back at option that is consistent with what we were doing in the previous term. It's probably not going to be a great number of consents, maybe 4 or 5 consents, possibly in a per annum, and the majority of members that sit on the Regional Hearing Committee do have them making good decisions, certification, and in fact, when we add our Tumu Taiao Yvette Lewis to it, we will then have 5 sitting actually on that committee with the certification to make that. And just noting that there are a number of several other councillors outside the committee who also do have that certification or are looking to get them making good decisions. But at the moment we have we will have subsequent to a paper later in the agenda, 5 individuals on there. So a good range of skills and experience and expertise there. So it's really, that's probably, that's the important thing I'd like to draw everybody's attention to.
Any questions for Claire?
What Claire said, and just to acknowledge Councillor Scott for sort of raising that with the committee and encouraging us to have a look at that proposal. And like Claire said, we did look at a lot of different ways to do it, and sort of landed on that. But the good thing is, I think we all agreed that it would be good experience for councillors, especially councillors with making good decisions, qualifications to do those consents as they did in the last term. So just acknowledging that, and thank you.
Yes, Peter and I both support that. It's a good move. All right, we move these resolutions. I'll move it from the chair. I'll take it that you'll second it, Claire. Moved by me, seconded by Councillor Mackay. All those in favour of receiving the reports, please say aye. There being no one opposed, I'll declare it carried. Thank you very much. We're up to 8.1.3 now, and this is over to you again, John.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This report covers the first meeting of the Investment Entity Investigation Committee, a committee put together by this council. It had two matters of business, one to nominate and elect a chairman for that committee. I was the lucky person for that, and I thank my colleagues for that confidence. And the second piece of work there was to nominate and approve the appointment of Paul Munro as the independent member to provide advice to that committee. Paul has a significant background in business and industry and council-controlled organisations, and at the moment runs Christchurch City's investment vehicle. So he will provide us with significant benefit of information and understanding as we further investigate where we may wish to go with our investments and the setting up of companies. So they were the two pieces of business associated with that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I understand he's coming today. That's excellent. So anybody who wants to attend that workshop can go along, because I think it'll be really worthwhile. I'll move the resolution that we received the minutes, seconded by Councillor Sunkel. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. There being no one against, I'll declare that carried. We're up to 8.2 now, statutory committees, and first one off the ranks is Canterbury Regional Transport. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's a pretty straightforward report and recommendations. Just noting that they are unconfirmed minutes from that meeting. The two major recommendations I received these unconfirmed minutes from the 26th of November and agree to the variations, the Land Transport Act 2's Appendix A Regional Program, which is the Lindenwood Eastgate Public Transport Hub Facilities Upgrade, the major cycleway wheels to wings airport route, and the Capital Regeneration Acceleration Fund. So that is pretty much it. But before I move that, can I just acknowledge that the work of staff that they've done in terms of RTC this term, and both of the people I'd like to thank specifically aren't here. They've left our employment, which is unfortunate, but Ben Wong and Hamish Slack, who moved the RTC committee's prioritisation work and in terms of how we think about RTC funding in a really difficult period forward for us, and we've got some really good consensus around that. And also, Jesse, just to acknowledge the fact of your leadership in that space, and also to acknowledge at the end of the year, but not at the end of the week, your contribution also, Tane. So I'd like to move those recommendations.
Thank you. Seconded for those recommendations, seconded by Councillor Tane Apanui. Any questions anybody's got? Councillor Mackay.
Well, maybe a question or comment. I note that the regional committee, the regional transport committee here is certainly been kept up to speed around the Northern Motorway and the corridor, and that there's an opening function coming up. It doesn't actually say whether we're going or whether any members out of the regional transport committee are going. I'm thinking it's probably quite pertinent. It's a regional route.
So we have had invitations to that. I received an invitation, which unfortunately I cannot make, but Tane's going to, from the regional transport committee in my place. Jenny is going in terms of her function as chair, and I also understand that Phil, you're attending in terms of the PT form. So we'll have a group of people there, and I think that there's a really good opportunity to integrate with the minister on a number of things and get a welcome to Canterbury. So I'm really disappointed that I won't be there, but as I've said before, there are higher powers in my life. So
and while we're there, and I informed the councillors group previously, but there will be we will be talking about the Greater Christchurch Transport Strategy there, and with the mayor of the city. So I'm going with the mayor to that meeting. I'd also like, Councillor Clearwater.
To comment on resolutions briefly, I certainly want to congratulate the committee on holding this committee of Canterbury, of course, and I guess it could be seen as a focus there and these recommendations on Greater Christchurch. It's not always the case, but I wanted particularly to mention that I'm impressed that another major cycleway has been supported by that committee. So that clearly, helps assist the change of mode of transport, and particularly in this case, active transport. So thank you, Peter and Tony.
And Chair, I believe that you're going on a trip around Canterbury.
I will. So on the 17th and 18th of February, staff are organising a trip for the mayors and NZTA Wakatahi senior staff, and we're undertaking a tour of the province in terms of the major points of transport. So that's the port, the airport here, then internal hub, Kiwi Rail, and then we will go to Timaru and we'll talk to them down there about the port. We hope to have the Regional Transport Committee meeting down there. But I think in the Merrill Forum down there also, and one of the things that we want to do is with this group, and it's Mayor Porton's suggestion, and he's making sure the Merrill Forum are involved in this, is to have a really good discussion about how do we hub freight across Canterbury in the first instance, and to ensure that we get trucks off roads and greenhouse gases down and all those sorts of things, and improve safety. And we've got some really good empirical evidence to support that in terms of what's happening between the inland ports and the what's the port? Littleton Port at the moment, where I think something like 220 truck movements a week have been already taken off Bron Street. Then looking at what the hurdles are to increase that. So then you get down to, if you want to do more than that, it's about double tracking, all those things. And we're going to need and increasing tunnel size and all those sorts of things. So we're going to need some support on that. Mayor Broughton, in his wisdom's, invited all the MPs to join us, all the Canterbury MPs. And we do hope also that the Minister might spend some time with us. And I think transport staff have already, I see Edward sitting down the corner, and Jeremy thinking about maybe doing something on my way when we get to Timaru on the Thursday night. So it's a really good opportunity to get a whole lot of people on a bus, have a significant conversation in terms of, where are the crunch points in Canterbury in terms of this, what can we do, and involving Kiwi Rail across that. So it's just an initial discussion, but an understanding also, and then pushing on from that, we're also at top of mind wanting to have that conversation with Southland, Otago and the coast. So this is just going to be a precursor, I guess.
All right, well,
Thank you. And Councillor Scott has touched a wee bit on what I wanted to say, that page 53, item 7 reports, resolution 1.3. I just want to note that 100% increase of tonnage of freight moved by rail in Canterbury. That is huge in terms of reducing our greenhouse emissions, in terms of reducing the costs associated with road maintenance. And I really want to congratulate and thank the committee for this move. You know, it's a really strong signal to send that we want to be using our rail networks more. And I hope that we can continue to follow this up with further actions.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Well, comment on that, because the possibility of doing this work is because of some really strong work that's gone on before us in terms of setting the base for this, in terms of the freight study that was undertaken in 2017-18, I think. So staff here should be really happy. We act as a secretariat across the South Island. We're at the repository of a lot of information. They're just working really hard now with Jesse and others to work out what levers we can pull to actually make those things happen. So we're sort of working away at this stuff, and we don't want to be too overt about it, because you can't claim stuff until it happens. We know that Kiwi Rail is constrained in terms of what its its asset capability in the South Island is, but we're working with them, and I think that it's a bit like the Ken Taylor work. It's like if we can collaborate with a whole lot of people, then we can get a good result. So that's what we're trying to do.
Councillor Mackenzie.
I was just going to make, which might sound like a bit of a counterpoint to Nicole's comments, but I was listening on the radio this morning on the way up to the forum, talking about the inadequacies of politicians thinking they can come up with answers to freight. In terms of Auckland, the politicians thought a Newport and Northport would be a good idea, and a ship has just gone in there. And the sheer volume of freight that has to be shifted over 400 kilometres of inadequate roading, as opposed to going into Tauranga or the Port of Auckland, where it would have been a 20-kilometre trip, the additional cost, the inefficiencies and the greenhouse gases
And so I guess what I'm urging, Peter, when you go on your tiki tour around Canterbury, that you consider the comments from those who actually are operating in the freight world rather than the politics of how people think we should deal with freight, because I think both parties learn from each other.
I think that's really important, and I think that's the basis for the conversation that we're prepared to have. I've also heard that, and that's like, yeah, we can do that because that's, the far north needs the growth, but if you can't get them there and back safely, then that's crazy. The other thing I didn't mention was coastal shipping, which of course comes into this also, and that is one of those things that adds resilience to some sort of strategy across the South Island. I mean, we're looking at what what our future looks like, and our future sometimes doesn't look all that good. We've already had a bit of a prelude with Rangatahi, AF8, but those are the sorts of things that we need in the back of our mind also. So I take that on board in.
Thank you. All right, it's been moved by Peter Scott and seconded by Tane, the resolution around confirming the minutes, and agrees to vary the regional land transport plan by adding the proposals detailed in the report on page 50. All those in favour, please say yes. Yes. Yeah, we received the minutes. Didn't I say that at the start? Received the minutes. Got that. We're moved all 1 and 2 on page 50. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against, please say no. Confirmed. We've gone to page 57, item 8.3, the Joint Committee. Phil, this is your report.
Thanks, Jenny. So this, in fact, was the last meeting of the Greater Christchurch Public Greater Christchurch Public Transport Joint Committee. And so the main issues that we dealt with, for example, the business cases are also on our agenda later. We'll be dealing with that. And I think particularly because that you'll be aware that the other business case for the mass rapid transit, but that's well underway, and particularly with the completion of the foundation case, which we'll look at, and the rest of the network, plus the fact that the basis of the regional land transport plan has been completed. It was certainly agreed by the committee that it was timely to wrap things up as a committee, and you'll be aware that those delegations will be passed to the Greater Christchurch Partnership. So they were the main sort of areas of discussion, but particularly, of course, the Public Transport Futures Report, which we can look at later.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Clearwater. Have I got a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Mackay. Oh, you want a question? Seconded by.
What are we actually moving and seconding? Because it's just, according to my recommendation here, it's receiving the unconfirmed minutes. Is that correct?
So yeah. On page 60, we received
57.
They're on page
57.
57.
Yes. So we're just receiving the unconfirmed minutes of the GPs.
Yeah, there's another report. All right, all those in favour, please say aye. All those against, there's been no one. That's carried. 8.3.2 on page 63. This is the Greater Christchurch Partnership Committee. It's just been thought a good practice to actually table these minutes on the minutes onto the council agenda, both for public visibility and so we have a record of having actually publicly received them. Is there anybody who I'll move that we receive the unconfirmed minutes from the Greater Christchurch Partnership Committee held on the 6th of November. Is there some, Grant, would you like to second that? Seconded by Councillor Grant Edge. Are there any questions? There being no questions, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? There being nobody against, I'll declare that carried. Thank you very much. We're now up to item 9 on page 70. I would ask Councillor Southworth to speak to this report, please.
All right, thank you, Chair. So we've agreed to the report at every full council meeting on how climate change is integrated into our work programme. This is really primarily to recognise the importance of climate change. We know that we've just had the government announce a climate emergency. We got in ahead, and so recognising that, but also to make sure we keep public informed. Today, we're going to focus on work from the biodiversity and biosecurity portfolio, which Councillor Mackenzie will cover in a moment. But firstly, I want to give a quick update on the Canterbury Climate Change Risk Assessment. So the Canterbury Climate Change Working Group has scoped a detailed regional climate change risk assessment for Canterbury. And that working group is made up of staff from Environment Canterbury, the Canterbury Territorial Authorities, Te Runanga o Ngā Tahu, and Papatupu Runanga, which is currently represented by Tumu Taiao and Waimakariri. The purpose of the assessment is to develop a shared understanding of priority risks and opportunities from climate change to Canterbury's environment, society and economy. This will then support the adaptation planning, which is really important, by local authorities and by Papatupu Runanga. The risk assessment is building on the work of the risk screening, which was completed back in April, and that report is sitting on the Merrill Forum's website. And the contract's now been let and awarded to a consortium, which is led by Tonkin and Taylor, but also involving NIWA, the Cawthron Institute, Manaki Whenua Blanca Research, and the Agribusiness Group. And that will be completed in June next year, June 2024. Thank you.
So I'll just give an update with respect to climate change and biosecurity. So climate change is predicted to increase both the risk and the impact of new and existing invasive species in New Zealand. So Environment Canterbury are developing strategies for managing invasive species in Canterbury in the face of climate change. We've commissioned the Crown Research Institute Ag Research to predict the future of how the future climate will change the impacts of invasive terrestrial plants in Canterbury. And our staff are also currently assisting the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment with a system-wide review of how New Zealand manages invasive plants in the face of a changing climate.
Thank you. So, is there anybody who wants to ask any questions? Yes, go ahead, Yvette.
Kia ora. Look, I just want to acknowledge that, like in the briefing session, was asking about supporting Papatupu Runanga. So really pleased to see 6, 5, 6 and 7 in there in terms of working, you know, with Ngāi Tahu and Papatupu Runanga. And just want to re-emphasise, if I may, around that in terms of that, you know, I would tautoko, you know, whānau hapu iwi, you know, lead in this area, you know, in order to assist the Papatupu driving, you know, this through with the Tromp staff, because of their, as I mentioned in that briefing, you know, we have Ngāi Tahu have their own strategy, but it's really important to help them to push it through into there, that they lead and push through. So, yeah, thank you for listening and good to see that in the council paper. Thank you.
Were there any further questions? All right, that it's moved then by Councillor Southworth and seconded by Councillor Mackenzie that we receive the update on climate change. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody against? There being no one, I declare that carried. We're now on to report 9.2 on page 72, public transport, combined business case and investment futures. Would you like to speak to this, Phil, and then maybe we could have staff come up? Or
yeah, be good if staff answered the technical questions particularly. But Councillor, before I refer to this public transport futures, sorry, yeah.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Councillor
Really just to introduce it, and I'll speak to it later, but starting by really thanking staff for an enormous amount of work that has gone into this over many years. And I think it's at an excellent point now. And staff will explain briefly how we got there, but I think a lot of you have already heard about the foundations case for public transport, as well as the rest of the network. So basically, while they're separate pieces of work, they're joined up. And you'll see in the report too that the other business case is well underway. That's the rapid mass transit. So while it's been very complex stuff, I certainly thank staff for their assiduousness, and I guess councillors too for being involved in helping it all be developed.
Kia ora. Thank you, councillor. So the paper you have before you is really for the council to receive the public transport futures combined business case and investment package, to endorse the strategic approach to public transport as outlined in that business case, and to make provision for the recommended investment program to be considered as part of consultation on the long-term plan, and under 4 to include the revised recommended investment program in the consultation draft of the Canterbury Regional Land Transport Plan 2021-2031. And finally, off the back of that, to endorse staff to submit the combined business case to Waimakariri New Zealand Transport Agency. So effectively what the council is doing along with partners as part of the greater Christchurch partnership is supporting and endorsing a strategic trajectory in terms of public transport investment, noting of course that the specific funding allocations will be consulted on and decided by the council separately as part of the long-term plan.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Edge.
I was just going to say that thanks so much for the report, and it's good to see that there's the strategic direction is really looking positive, and obviously with some glitches along the way, but the staff have explained in this report how the incremental changes can still be made, still have positive gain, but the bigger picture is still there in the background.
Yeah, thank you. It's really good to see this, and keen to endorse it. But I also am sort of chomping at the bit to get more done more quickly, and I think a lot of our communities are as well. I was at a meeting just the other day, and residents in Diamond Harbour were asking, where's our bus? And can we use the bus? We need to mitigate climate change. So for me, there is a real issue when you look at the graph on page 78, that link between passenger numbers and the amount of spend per head. And I think we need to really look at addressing that. And I wonder what opportunities are there to investigate a more rapid installation of our public transport and these improvements. What opportunity we have? Is that a long-term plan process? How do we make this happen quicker?
Thank you, councillor. I think the short answer is absolutely yes. So what this does is set out a trajectory, particularly to get those foundations in place for public transport, including increased frequency and all of the matters that have been outlined in the report. As you know, through the council consideration of how fast it might want to progress that through its long-term plan, particularly in terms of investment, in terms of our component of the overall picture, which is about the buses and the ferries and that. There is opportunity to look at specific initiatives as to how that might be fast-tracked. So that is absolutely, this business case does not dictate how fast or slow. It really lays out a plan over the next 10 years for how we might approach that.
Any other questions? Councillor. No, councillor Scott.
Look, forgive me if I missed something, but this is a proposal for LTP to get funding for this. Then it's a business case process, a normal business case process, Phil, with the NZTA. Yeah. So, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. You did really clarify another important component of this piece of work. This piece of work is also NZTA's business case process. So anything, and as you know, we fund public transport in a shared partnership with NZTA. So this is part of their business case process, which is why to progress and in order for them to fund public transport in the future, we need the support of the council to endorse and also other councils, and then that goes into the funding pool that then becomes considered by NZTA. So you're absolutely right, Councillor.
All right, so anything else, would you, Claire?
Well, I just want to say I want to endorse it because of the fact that it is a business case that we've got to go out and try and leverage some money and from further partners. So in that respect, I'm supportive of it.
Thank you.
I'd just like to speak a little bit further about your report, if I may, because I think this is a major piece of work. And for me, this is also a milestone for us as a council in achieving it. And I also see, while we are all wanting to see how quickly it can be done, I think that the description of it being this is a trajectory and a plan, that's the way to go. But I also see that what's in the report as being very visionary, clearly visionary for our future. And like the objective's really clear. We sometimes wonder about it. It's basic because we're really talking about improving benefits from public transport. And I think the other day, Councillor Unfarm questioned about the word attractive. Well, I can understand that, but I think there's nothing wrong with making sure, for example, our buses and our bus infrastructure looks good. And somehow, but the bottom line is that it be efficient and effective. And what that means is it has to be convenient and competitive with the private car. So, and on top of that, we want the system to be engaging with people. That's how the real change in mode will happen. I think people have seen in the report some pretty big challenges, and those operating costs over a 10-year period, where the increase is going to be $50 million, and the fare box recovery with increased ridership, though, we're hoping that will increase by $32 million. So there's some big numbers in there, and we've got a long way to go. I'll come back to the annual plan in a minute. But I think there's neat outcomes which are also described in the report. Like we're talking about potentially 200 more bus shelters throughout the city. We're talking about a lot more bus lanes and priority measures, and with park and ride for Selwyn and Waimakariri. And of course, the new technology will give buses assistance to be able to just be first cab off the rank at those intersections. So, of course, a major achievement with all this is what we're asking for. It's going to have to be a reduction in car travel. We often repeat that 53% of our carbon emissions come from transport. So here we've got the top opportunity, I think, to decrease and indeed eliminate that. So I'm really glad that we as a council have accepted the real challenges for the climate change emergency for Canterbury. And a key part of that, of these business cases, is that Greater Christchurch can be expected to be an area of high population growth. In 10 years' time, they're expecting another 150,000 people in the city. So that's 1.5 times as big as Dunedin moving in. So we have sure got to do something about changing our mode of transport. So a well-planned system of public transport too will allow that integration of land use. So we have a more efficient spatial pattern, the key activity centres and residential living, so that urban creep and urban sprawl is stopped. The numbers are huge in terms of what can be achieved. So that the total number of private trips we expect to decrease by 13 million a year. It's a lot fewer cars on our streets. And around the carbon dioxide emissions, reducing that by 25 tonnes is no mean figure, and 4.5 tonnes of hydrocarbons as well. It's all easier said than done, of course, and the proof is going to be in the pudding. So to achieve that growth rate, we're going to have to step by step and increase the rate of bus riders by 5% each year, and that's a lot. And however, with this business case, I think we're really on a cusp, councillors, to achieve some big changes in our form of transport, and they're going to clearly be needed and required in the future. So we are indeed going to have to support this in our long-term plan. And I see it a bit like an athlete training, that the background training and all the work has been done, and we now need to get out of the starting blocks. And as my colleague Vicky has said, we need to do, as indicated, we need to do that urgently.
I thank you, Peter Scott, and then Nicole.
Yes.
Councillor Peter Scott.
Look, I know it's close. I know it's close to Christmas. I don't really want to be the Grinch here, but you know, this is, and there's a Winston Churchill quote, isn't it, about the end at the beginning of the end. It's not, you know, that one. But there's a lot of work to do here because this becomes a business case. And when it becomes a business case, then it competes under the National Land Transport Fund for funding. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of lobbying on this. And I would just like to make that really clear to council that this is not a slam dunk here. I mean, we need to go through the LTP process. So, and I'm sure you're very aware of this, but I just thought I'd like to point that out to people.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Huey would like to say that we're on a very good track in terms of collaborating with our partners on this, the best we've been for a long time. So I've got real confidence that we're probably going to get there, but as Councillor Scott and Councillor Clearwater have said, it's quite a long journey yet. So Councillor Nicole, would you like to speak?
Thank you. And I really want to acknowledge all the efforts that have gone to get us to where we are today. I really enjoyed reading this papers, the non-technical summary, pages 90 to 126. I had so many questions laid over from all of the briefings we've had before this that were answered by that document. So I can't speak highly enough of that document. That really was a hugely valuable document. So thank you to everyone involved with that. I want to acknowledge what you said yourself, Nadine, about that the council will be making a decision on funding this later at the long-term plan. However, recommendation 3 today is asking us to indicate how much funding we're signposting for spending through the long-term plan. And so for us, most provision is, we know, for OPEX, and that's for buses on the road. And we can see page 78, figure 1, shows after the earthquakes, our boardings almost halved, and since 2014-15, they've been declining almost back to where we were in 2012. Our OPEX figures, the table on page 86 of 181, shows that our OPEX spend on our bus services aren't significantly increasing until year 7. So that's 2 trienniums from now. There could be a whole new council by then. So I'm really concerned that we're not delivering anything at a point where a lot of us won't actually, won't still be here because we haven't put buses on the road. And we need buses on the road. We need to get people, you know, we've had higher boardings historically without all the dedicated infrastructure that is being proposed from the TAs, and as great as it is to have all that infrastructure, there's no point having the infrastructure if we don't have the buses to service the infrastructure. I question whether we could deliver our part of the short-term program within 3 years, or 1 LTP cycle, 1 council triennium, and then the medium term within 6 years, or 2 LTP cycles, or 2 council trienniums, instead of extending our main delivery out to a 3rd triennium. I want to see us prioritise getting buses on the road, people in those buses, and capital expenditure from our TAs that matches what we want from those buses, such as getting the bus stops, like Phil said, and having our park and ride in the right place for our express services. We should not be delivering the bulk of our work in 7 years. We need to get that funding into our LTP so we have a public transport system that people want to use, not that we have to force them to use. There's really, really good stuff in this, and I don't want to see us put it off because we're already scared of what potential rates rise we're looking at. We need to do this, and we need to start it now. So that's my thought.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Megan, Councillor Megan.
Nicole stolen a little bit of thunder because I did have some questions around, and thank you for clarifying that, Nadine, around recommendation 3, in that we are signposting funding for long-term plan discussion. We are, as others have referenced, having workshop conversations around long-term plan, and I myself had anticipated that we would have been having more conversations about public transport and a funding model that is sustainable for us, given it's our largest thing in our budget line, and it would have been my expectation that we were looking at alternative ways of rate funding public transport, whether that's other types of targeted rates or uniform charges, and I haven't seen that come through at this point in time. That puzzles me a little bit when we are talking in the magnitude of major increases in rates higher than that most widely reported in the media from other councils around this country. And that will come more public when we do go out with our draft consultation document in February. But I am concerned for a council that is very focused on climate change that we've had not as much of a focus on public transport and the way in which we fund it within the city and within Greater Christchurch is what I would have expected. So I'm happy for us to move forward with this business case. It's clear to me that the public transport funding model nationwide is fairly broken, but we do have an opportunity here to differentiate and to advocate and lobby strongly for our region. And I would like to see us do that, but I'd also like to ensure that we are smart about the way in which we fund public transport through our rate take, and we are exploring lots of models in order to how we pay for that in a fair and balanced way, particularly in Greater Christchurch. And I don't feel we've had those conversations yet, so I hope that we have them in future.
Thank you. Councillor.
Thanks. The foundation case is not very sexy, which is why I like it. A foundation's not meant to be sexy. It sits under your house. It's a big lump of concrete that's meant for stability. Now, I think this foundation's case does a brilliant job of that. And this secondary case that goes along with it paints a really good, solid picture of what the network is going to look like. It's not the aspirational piece that we will add later on. And yeah, probably the second piece is almost as unsexy as the first. But I'd like to endorse it and counter to the Christmas Grinch across the room. Because it is so solid, I think it is not a slam dunk, but it'll be as close to as we could possibly get. You could put that in front of almost any government, and I think they'd fund it. I think it's a superb piece of work by the staff and the consultants alike. I'd like to sort of second what Councillor Marshall said, and we need to sort of hop to and get some other things done, get that aspirational work done to get people on buses on roads, and let's start getting the carbon emissions down.
Thank you, Councillor Apanui. Councillor McKenzie.
Whereas I don't want to speak against endorsing this, because I think it is a good piece of work, and it's clear that it has the support of the council and other councils involved. And perhaps because I come from more a corporate governance position than a political governance position, I would just encourage those who are deeply involved, Councillor Clearwater, you, Councillor Clearwater, and others. I apologise for that. To be more critical about some of the information. So I read the report and I see the graph that tries to make a link between capital expenditure and patronage, and I ask myself, is there a link? Is there a link? Is the link proven? And my answer is no. But if you want to believe it, of course, it tells you what you want to believe. So I would just encourage those of you who are around this public transport committee just to be critical. Try to subsume your political enthusiasm for it and apply a more critical thought process to it, so that you find the glitches in the business cases put in front of you, so that you don't then end up making a mistake. And one of the things that I find myself questioning is really whether public transport in Christchurch is competing with a private motor vehicle, or whether it's competing with other modes of transport, and whether in fact those other modes of transport will make the public transport offering always look relatively a second choice compared to electric bicycles or lime scooters or whatever else the modern mode of transport might be. So I'm not speaking against it. I'm just saying let's try and be as critical as we can be, which then strengthens the choices you make going forward.
Thank you. I don't think I actually moved the resolution. So Councillor Clearwater, I'll take it that you'll move the resolution to the resolutions on page 72. And Councillor Nicole.
Sorry, can I just request that you move 1 and 2? I request that we move 3 separately because that's the one I have issue with.
Thank you. I'm very apologetic, Councillor Elizabeth Mackenzie. I didn't let you.
That's right. You said Councillor Mackenzie, and I wasn't quite sure which one was going to speak first. So, yeah. I mean, yeah. So I'd like to. While I do support this report, I do share the concerns of Councillor Southworth, Marshall, and Hands with respect to the plan not being perhaps ambitious enough, and the fact that we do need to get more funding more quickly. I mean, we need to reduce our carbon emissions by 2030 by 80%. And so we need to do this with some urgency. So that would just be my chief concern. The other one would be around addressing the issue of cheap parking versus fares, which are moderately expensive compared to parking. That would be my other big concern, which is partly related to what Councillor Mackenzie said. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. So we'll go back to the recommendations. Did I miss anybody else who was indicating? No, good. It's moved by Councillor Clearwater that we receive the paper, public transport, etc., and 2, endorse the strategic approach to public transport outlined in the combined business case. Seconded by Councillor Apanui. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? There being no one, that's carried. Councillor Clearwater moves number 3, makes provision for the recommended investment program in the Environment of Canterbury consultation document of the long-term plan 2021. Seconded by Councillor Apanui. Is there anyone who wants to discuss that question? Is that the one you want to talk? Oh, okay. All right, I'll put that to the vote. Do you want to say anything now I've moved it?
That we haven't received any information to amend it to, so I was just proposing that I abstain from this. I support us spending money on it, but I support us spending more than's indicated.
Yes, Dadi, would you like to speak?
I just wanted to make sure we were absolutely clear on this. So there's a few key points. One is that the paper, as Councillor Scott rightly pointed out, is indicating council support for a business case to go into the next stage of the process. Now that business case has been modelled over 10 years, and that's the envelope that's outlined in this paper, and is also the envelope that's been agreed in partnership across the Greater Christchurch partners. So that's number one. The decision by the council, or the contemplation by the council about how fast to progress that envelope over that 10 or longer period, is absolutely this council's decision in a separate process through consideration of the LTP and the matters that other councillors have put on the table. So just being really clear that the seeking of the or the endorsement of the recommendations is about endorsing the this business case to be then put forward to the NZTA, and also for the information contained in this business case to be properly considered by this council as part of its LTP process. I hope that just makes that clear. So if the council decides that it does want to, through its consultation, do more in the public transport, then that decision space is separate to this.
Thank you, Nadine. That's made it very clear. All right, in moving that, I think it's probably clear that we should note that there's a number of staff, councillors in the room who would like to make sure that in the LTP process, early next year, we visit the transport issue of the rates immediately as soon as we get back. So that is what I take from that. So just back to the resolution, it's moved by Councillor Clearwater, seconded by Councillor Apanui. All those in favour, we're doing number 3. Please say aye. Except you want to abstain? You'd like that recorded? Please do that. Number 3, and this is number 4. Yeah, I just got a bit dyslexic there. Number 4 includes the revised recommendation investment program by the consultation document of the Canterbury Land Transport Plan 2021-23, and number 5 submits the combined business case to Wakakotahi New Zealand Transport Agency. Moved by Councillor Clearwater, seconded by Councillor Apanui. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? No. Carried. Thank you very much. Have you not got that one? It's on the second page. It goes over a page, Claire. It runs over a page. It's just a process one anyway, telling them to submit it. Thank you, Peter. Page 127, 9.3. This is the dissolution of the Greater Christchurch Public Transport Joint Committee. Councillor Clearwater, are you moving this one?
Happy to, and I'll just speak to it briefly if I may. So, page 127. Look, I'm very pleased to be able to move this, if I may, because some of you will be aware that when the Public Transport Joint Committee was set up, I was part of that. I actually wanted to particularly, though, acknowledge some other people who are involved. One particularly was the former Commissioner, Rex Williams, and who was very instrumental in actually making, really getting this committee underway. And Edward, it's good you're still here today, because I think you're an early pioneer too. You probably were here too, Nadine. So Hugh, overall, it's gone very well as a committee. Everyone would have liked it to have gone faster. But the other key person too, who was acknowledged at the last meeting, was the chair, Alistair James, who did a fine job in actually keeping the partners on track and coordinating us, and so that it worked extremely well overall in a collaborative way. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, because a huge amount of work went in, and it's time to pass the ball, I guess, to the Partnership Committee.
Thank you. So that resolution there on page 127 approves the dissolution and notes public transport activities of the partnership. That's moved by Councillor Clearwater, seconded by Councillor Apanui. All those in favour, please say aye. That's anyone against? There being no one opposed, that's carried. Oh yes, you can ask a question now. We've done it. Very bad process.
That's fine. It wasn't going to change the result. What I'm just wanting an assurance for, and in the paper on point 17 we talk about the GCPC agreeing to incorporate any necessary changes as part of a planned general review of its memorandum as a result of the shift in responsibilities. I guess I'm just a little bit concerned, I guess, around the representation from a public transport view in the Greater Christchurch Partnership, and I'm wondering if this is a watering down, I guess, of representation. So, is there been any discussion or thinking about how perhaps we may get another councillor on there, or wider representation even from Selwyn and Waimakariri and additions into there?
Yeah, Councillor Clearwater.
Well, around the constitution, I think, of the partnership, we can't change that into the membership. I think there is a way that, in fact, the transport part of the partnership can really be pushed along, so that, in fact, you know, the knowledge about PT isn't kind of lost, Claire, if that's what you're here. I think it's early days yet, particularly because we have partners involved with this who also want to, you know, do their best too. So I think your point perhaps though about ensuring that we have, you know, sufficient advice and expertise and experience, that is understood. And it's, as I say, it's early days, and we are talking, of course, with our partners, which is important.
Yeah. So supplementary to that, I read somewhere else in our papers, and presented here probably for receiving, that there is talk of setting up some sort of working group around the transport, public transport within the GCP. Is there an option there to co-opt people outside that current membership? Because
yeah, so again, Claire, I guess that's something that the partners are just talking about. Again, it's a balance. We've been well guided in the past. I certainly wouldn't want to preempt anything. I think it's a very good idea, as I indicated, to have something like a working group that is supported. But it's early days, and absolutely we next year I'm sure early on, as early as possible, we as a council should discuss this. But it's also getting that balance with the other councils, because they've all got their views too.
Nicole? Yeah.
So just additional to Claire's line of questioning, I would also have serious concerns if we hadn't dotted our I's and crossed our T's about representation and membership and how we can co-opt people on there. And I'd like some staff assurance that we can get people in there as necessary to participate fully in public transport matters, and that the dissolution of this committee has not resulted in a backward step.
Can I just say that that's been discussed at the Greater Christchurch Partnership, and that's what we're all working on. We just definitely don't want that to happen. So that's what's being worked on.
We've just dissolved the committee if we haven't got an answer to those fundamental questions.
Well, it's about negotiations with partners, and we needed to go through this step first, and we took advice on that. So that's what we're doing. Nadine, would you like to speak?
I thought I just might provide a little bit of context. Councillor Clearwater really articulate how important the Christchurch Joint Committee was for PT. But they've done two really key deliverables in their term. One was in partnership, they've developed and consulted on, and then delivered the regional public transport plan. So it was a strategic planning function that then has guided the trajectory of the subsequent business cases that have flowed through. So they've also, in terms of the next steps, in terms of implementing that public transport plan, delivered on what the councillors just endorsed, which was the business case for the foundations and the rest of network. So from that sense, they've had a really important role in terms of across the partners, guiding the trajectory of the planning associated with public transport. We are now moving into a delivery phase for a lot of the public transport initiatives, which very much is an Environment Canterbury implementation operational component. The remaining piece of strategic work is, of course, the mass rapid transport piece, which integrates with the broader land use, transport planning, and some of those, what Stuart would talk about in terms of those demand levers that are going to need to be considered over time. So that really is the key reason why that conversation is appropriate for the Greater Christchurch Partnership to be involved. I think, as Councillor Clearwater said, that there's been a level of comfort, I guess, through this year that the Greater Christchurch PT Committee has delivered well, and now there's a natural progression to the mass rapid transport being considered by the Greater Christchurch Partnership, and further discussion is of course needed amongst the partners as to how do we ensure that we stay lined up when it comes to delivery. So that would be the staff comment.
Councillor Edge.
I was just going to reinforce that and just refer councillors to page 68 and 69, where it gives an explanation of the decisions made by the Greater Christchurch Partnership regarding the dissolution of that committee, and it indicates there what the proposal is to continue with that work in some other form.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you. Look, mine's just a comment, I guess, more than anything. And I think that we've come a long way in terms of the PT and getting on side with each other and trying to get a really good outcome for PT across Christchurch. It would seem though, if you're sitting on the outside of all these meetings and you don't go to Mayoral Forum and others, that there is a whole agenda there. But I trust that our representation around those committees provides this council with the oversight required on that, and that we are in the room for the right reasons. So I trust the process, and I think that if we get the situation where we don't trust the process anymore, then we need to sit down in this room with no staff in this room and talk about it.
Thank you, Peter. So we move that, Councillor Clearwater moves this. I've already moved it, have I?
We have voted actually.
Oh, we voted as well. Great. Forgot that I did it wrong. Okay, we're up to page. Thank you very much, everybody. Are you going to stay there, Nadine? Because we need you for this next one, I think, 9.4. On page 131. This is the proposed transfer of Building Act consent functions for large dams. Excuse me. Have I missed one?
We're going to move this one.
Yeah,
to the end.
that's right. I'm just going to say that. I was actually going to say that. No, but I forgot because Nadine was sitting there. That made me forget. Yes, Nadine, we'll have to bring you back at the end of the meeting because there's been a discussion to do it at the end of the meeting. Thank you very much. All right, we're moving on to 9.5. This is on page 138. Claire, would you like to introduce this?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, we're on page 138 for anybody who's looking where they are. Look, it is my pleasure actually to introduce this topic on the CWMS Zone Committee revised terms and reference. But before I actually start, I really do want to take the time to thank the staff that have been involved in this. And certainly I see some staff online, Mel's there, she's been also involved, I think. But those that even that aren't in the room, I think if you can pass our thanks on to them. This has been a piece of work that's been in process for 15, 18 months, and it would be really nice to see it come to its conclusion from our point of view today. And it did, and I will take the papers as read, but I think there's some important points to make people aware of. Certainly those people that might listen to the recording later on, and there will be some zone committees that are very interested in the outcome of this around the background there. So I think it's important that I think it was really 2018 or about mid-2018, we reported back to the Mirror Forum on our targets review that was done at the time. And some of the stuff that was identified there, then we needed to go out and actually review the CWMS targets and to find some targets for 2025 and 2030. So that piece of work was done, and out of that there was some feedback provided that indicated that we actually needed to look at some other issues as well. The Mirror Forum received that feedback initially then and confirmed that they would like to ask Environment Canterbury to lead some development of advice on how we could actually help zone committees transition from what has been a focus on policy really since their inception in the early 2010 and 11 for those that were perhaps later formed. Our focus around policy and planning to now one of implementation. We were hearing a lot when we were doing our targets review that there was an urgent need, and we know this, an urgent need to get those on the ground actions. So that sort of was really the background of it. The paper is quite a lengthy one, and I think it's very, very well written by staff, and I thank you very much for the preparation of that. So the draft terms of reference are included there. There is an appendix with the draft letter of expectations from the TAs who have provided them to us. Some of them are in drafts, some of them are obviously their finals, and some are still to be received by us there. So really, the terms of reference that are outlined there, it's not a one size fits all. I mean, there will be some tweaking to make them specific to the zone committees. For example, here in Christchurch, the Christchurch City has requested that their terms of reference allow for an alternate because they're actually required to sit at the table of 3 zone committees. So it just helps them make sure that people can actually attend and represent them. Similarly, people will note that the Hiranui District Council is continuing to explore their options for what a new joint committee in that area will actually look like. I think the other important thing to note is point 11, where we're also inviting the respective runanga to add their priorities to the letter of expectations if they so wish to do, and they can actually be provided alongside the Environment Committee's letter and the TA's letter as guidance for the zone committees in their future. Before we get too far along, I do want to just acknowledge all the good work, and it's an extreme amount of effort that previous zone committee members have put in over the last 10 years and to get where we are. So those past and present, I think that we must acknowledge the work and effort they've put in. The social license, well, it's not social license really, but it's the acceptability of the CWMS strategy and collaboration and getting people at the table who really expect to be around the table and having conversations. So I think that we have moved on a long way over the last 10 years, and a lot of that goes to the fact that we've got zone committees and members that have led that process, and must acknowledge that as we move forward. So I guess the important things there to note really are around the new functions that we're now expecting the zone committees. It's around giving them more clarity about what their role is. I know that probably many of you around the table, and certainly those of us who have been involved with zone committees, particularly over the last couple of years, they have felt a little bit like, what am I actually here for? Particularly after you finish a very thorough and intense process of developing a zip addendum for a planning process. And it's like you work up to this peak and then you hand over your document and it's, well, now what am I going to do? And it's that we needed to resolve that, because it was something that was repeating in zone committees and not a very helpful space for them to be in. So the new functions there, they're laid out in page 16. I don't think I need to explain anything around them. I've mentioned the letter of shared priorities from the council and the runanga who choose to be involved in that. I think one of the important things is the development for new zone committees around having an action plan, which is going to be quite focused and developed up within the frameworks that we've given them. So those action, they will be guided by the terms of reference, for example. CWMS and its targets, really important, not when keeping that at the forefront of everything there, and the letter of shared priorities. And their work will also be guided by the iwi management plans, the zone implementation plans, the work that they've already done in consultation with their communities and their addendums, and any further community engagement and feedback. And sitting around that, of course, we've got the context, the latest context with the NPS and the RMN changes and Te Manuatua Wai and stuff like that. So that's actually all sitting in there and has to be worked with as well. I think it's also important, if we move on to the financial implications there, that there is likely to be some additional costs across all zone committees, because we have actually looked at adding a youth member and providing an honorarium for them. An independent chair looking to run the community member refresh process, or the selection panel process. We're committed to induction and training of all members, including Treaty Waitangi training and Nohu Marae experience. And currently at the stage that we'll be looking to come out of our zone committee budget. But as time gets on, we'll have some finer details around there. And I guess the other thing, as I said, just referred to before, is around the context that we're actually having to work in, particularly around the uncertainty from the outputs that central government's actually requiring us to work within, and also free waters reform, Indigenous biodiversity, and what the expectations around that are, and of course the Randerson report, not to mention some others that I've probably forgotten, such as Ngāi Tahu and its declaration, seeking a declaration of rangatira over fresh water in the Takiwa. So, you know, it's quite a complex place that we're expecting our zone committees to work in. The terms of reference are outlined there in the paper on page 144 to 48, 9, isn't it? 140. Actually, the last page. These have been well mulled over by us here. We've had many briefings and quite a number of briefings. They've been back to the TAs. They've been signed off by the Mayoral Forum at its meeting on the 27th of last month. And I understand, do you want me to talk to this or would you like? Okay, rightio. Our chair will just talk to one slight to the recommendation there. So maybe I'll hand over at this stage to you, Jenny.
So notes that the first number one, we'll move that one. By Councillor Clearwater, accepted by Councillor. All those in favour. That's carried. Now, recommendation 2 is now amended and it reads as follows. You've got a copy. Basically, it's directed down to amend clause 4 of the zoning convention and it's changing clause 4 from so that it doesn't read must with regard to the shared method of so following it's very of the report that paragraph 3 starts of shared. It actually says the legislation challenging God.
Yeah, that's yeah.
So that can be moved by yeah. Was there any discussion about that? Right, I'll still talk about that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, kia ora, Councillor Mackay for outlining and introducing this paper. I total for what you said about the mammoth effort that's gone in by staff and not just of Environment Canterbury, but all the partner organisations, the TLAs, Brunanga, etc. Behind the scenes, the Mayoral Forum as well. It's been like I said, a mammoth undertaking to get this refreshed. So I just really want to again acknowledge the staff around the work that's gone in. And it's a collaborative effort. I think that's the important thing that everyone needs to remember. They're not just terms of reference for Environment Canterbury or anything, they're for our partners as well. And in the timeline, of course, we'll note that the TAs are confirming these in time, February and March next year, etc. So there's still a bit more to go on it, of course. And of course, further work's required around the priorities from TAs as well and Papatupu Runanga in time. And I just really wanted to support the change that's been made to put the letter of shared into the guidance section. I think that it is the intention. If you read the paper, that's what the intention. It's always been the talk around the table. So I think it's only right to put that in there. So I just really wanted to support that. But I did want to bring up one other thing, and it's just I've noticed kia ora, Jane is in the room. I did want to give some feedback from the regional committee the other day, and it's just really for noting, but there is one thing in particular I'll raise at the end. But I just really wanted to note the feedback from the zone committee, the regional committee around this paper in particular. It went to them on Tuesday. So just first of all, that they support the action plan work course and the new, that sort of move towards action. But had a question about around planning and the responsibilities under the NPS for freshwater. So just that's a note. They're aware that there's obviously some more work to be done around planning, so that's something important to remember. So that was that. Empowerment and funding is critical to them. They acknowledge that zone committees will be more empowered in the future, but that there is a important funding question for them around where does that happen, how does that happen. So that's just something to think for us to think about as well. There was concern expressed around the Hurunui District Council stuff, and that's just fair. Not understanding what's going on there, so that was something that people raised. And also some concern around sort of just the Runanga representation. That was mainly from the Ngaitahu reps on the regional committee, and how that best reflects partnership as it's worded in the document. So that's just maybe some further work that we need to do with Papatapi Runanga and Te Runanga o Ngaitahu, as well as other partners on that. And the one thing in particular was raised around clause 4 was that the zone committee action plan must work within, and the comment was, and be aligned with the zone committee terms of reference and the Canterbury water management strategy and target. So it's a really small change, but I think the point was made that sometimes maybe things get out of line, and that's important to make sure they're in line, even though the must is there and work within, but the alignment can be an important thing. So I just wanted to put that out there. I don't know how we deal with it, other than moving another change, but that's just something that came from our meeting with the regional committee that I thought was worthy of note.
Suggesting there's something we can deal with it today, or are you just noting?
It was, I think they had no objection.
Yes, because it makes sense. Yeah. Well, just add and be aligned with. We'll add those words. Is that all right with you, Mover? And you, seconder on this one? Yeah, we'll just change it to that then. That's a very good point, Craig. Thanks very much. Well, I'll put that one to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. There being nobody against, I'll declare that carried. We've got 2 more to move. Notes the summary of priorities identified by the councils in their letters, and 4 notes the next steps to communicate outcomes to the review and begin a progress to refresh community members. Moved by Councillor Claire Mackay, seconded by Councillor Nicole Marshall. All those in favour, please say aye. Oh, no, wait a minute. What about you, Councillor Mackenzie? Did you still want to speak? Oh, we'll go ahead. Yeah. Do you want to ask it now then, or are you right?
Yeah, so I have a question for Council Kano, or a concern I just want to raise about the terms of reference. I note that Te Mana o Te Wai is not central to the terms of reference, and that it is the CWMS, which I understand is perhaps non-statutory now, given the new government legislation. And so my question is, how are we going to address this issue? And particularly, there are also zone implementation plans which contain goals which will no longer be consistent with the national direction of freshwater. So how is that going to be addressed with these terms of reference?
I can definitely answer the first one, because if you go to page 144 under purpose and functions, the committee's purpose is to uphold the mana of the freshwater bodies within their zone. Basically is the Te Mana o Te Wai concept. We specially actually added that in.
It does also say balance the interests of all water interests in the region. So
by facilitating enduring land and water management solutions that give effect to the Canterbury water management strategy. So this is around the strategy, but we realise that that's the context that we've now got to work in. So I'm confident that covers the Te Mana o Te Wai, and I see Craig's rearing to go here.
Oh, I just cut you off, Claire. Craig.
That, because it was a discussion that we had at the freshwater portfolio a while back now, when we an early iteration of the terms of reference. And I think it's fair to say, as we heard from our Tuia Hui, that Te Mana o Te Wai as a concept isn't obviously a Ngaitahu thing. So I think it would have been wrong of us to shove that straight into these terms of reference. So what we did purposefully is put these words in there instead, which in a way say a similar thing, but in a different way. But I really support the way we've done it here, and I don't think anyone would disagree with the words to uphold the mana of freshwater bodies in their zone. So yeah, I think that's a way to acknowledge it, but not go to do what we haven't really discussed with Ngaitahu. So yeah, that's my explanation to that.
Thank you, Councillor Pauling. Councillor Edge.
I've just got some comments, if I may, on the paper. Yeah, I too note that at least 3, possibly 4 of the zone committees have yet to confirm their shared letter on this, which for me is a bit of a reflection of some reservations that I have about the terms of reference, which seem to have caused a lot of confusion amongst zone committees, existing zone committees and the TAs. But obviously it's gone through the Mayoral Forum and it's been accepted by them. And I think things are adaptable and possibly flexible over time. And I do note that the discussion we've just been having about the on item 29 on page 142 about significant uncertainty about legislative requirements, including the essential freshwater package, Three Waters performance reform, and what they might mean in the future as well. So it's really, and I think that was one of my earlier reasons was and I think it's been resolved now by what we've just done on this change to item 5, where it's a guide that we're now guiding. The letter is a guide. And it means it's then flexible and can deal quite quickly with these legislative requirements. I just on a note, in terms of Environment Canterbury's list of priorities, they're fine. But listening this morning and being reminded by Ken Taylor again in the presentation he gave us, and the presentations that we've had from Diane Lucas, best fit land typing sort of issues, and the National Science Challenge presentation that we had, they've all talked about subcatchment kind of action plan or subcatchment approach, smaller mosaic across our landscapes. And I just think that it would be good if this, in terms of the way forward, further adapting this terms of reference and how things can be actioned, is to develop some framework for subcatchment management planning. We heard yesterday from the Huranui District Council Land Care Group. They've got some catchment farming groups, but there's other mechanisms too in terms of involving the broader community in smaller parcels. So I think that would then make really good use of our current science. And so you've got some rationale behind the priority setting going forward. Maybe we can't do anything these next 3 years, but I think beyond that, the mechanism for that as a tool needs to be some subcatchment management planning sort of thing. And I know the Cawthorne Institute are also looking at that, and people from Land Care Research at Lincoln. So it is a conversation that's being had in a broader context, throughout New Zealand. The other thing in terms of this package that we've got here, which zone committees have, certainly Kaikoura as well, we've changed the terms of reference in terms of what the zone committees are looking at. But the zone committees have no ability to action anything in terms of delivery on the ground. There's nothing in here that I can see about the designers, who's going to design some of these things, who's going to, what are we doing in terms of project management and contract organisation, organising contracts and things like that. So those operational matters have not been addressed in this. Maybe they are somewhere else, but I think that whole process is the fundamental basis of it. And that was the frustration of the zone committees, is who's going to do this for us? Where's the money that's going to be contributing to these so-called shared projects? Where's that coming from? There's nothing that I can see that has given guidance or Environment Canterbury's long-term plan initiatives to deliver on those things. It's an expensive exercise. All the zone committees that I believe that all they can do is pretty much do what they're doing now. Suggest that this needs to be done or that needs to be done, and this is our priorities. What are you going to do about it, Environment Canterbury, TAs? So that coordination and collaboration of on-the-grounds action is going to be really critical. So I just think that's probably needs to be worked through, whether or not it is in train, I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Councillor Clare, did you want to respond? Or do you want to do anything? Because we've got.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to put the motion, but before we do that, I mean, I do think that a couple of comments there, I can probably give a little bit of an answer to it. And I think what we have seen is we've sat here as council and had presentations by a number of rural stakeholders throughout the group, and one as late as yesterday afternoon by the Huronui Dryland group. It's nothing to do with the Huronui District Council. There is the fact that these catchment groups are actually happening on the ground now. They're happening by themselves. They're almost happening separate to us, but they're not happening separate to us. We do have staff involved in most of these processes. We also have staff involved in sometimes putting their applications together for them to get some funding. And the example that you just alluded to, the Huronui Dryland group yesterday, over the last 18 months, they've gone out and been able to leverage that. Well, they've been able to get $4.2 million worth of funding. And part of that was that they were a group that spun out of what we traditionally call the 10% rule in the Huronui district. But they had themselves organised together as a collective, and then they actually worked with other organisations and agencies to get themselves established, write an application and get it in there. And all power to them. I mean, absolutely great. We also, I won't go because we're time limited, but there are other catchment groups and other groups of people that are on the ground already doing this stuff. And I think it's how we as Environment Canterbury work with them. We can't expect 7, 8, 9, 10 people around a zone committee to be doing all the doing. They're not there to do the doing. They're there to connect. They leverage their connections, direct people, or bring them funding options to their attention, for example. So I think that's where this change in the way that a zone committee actually operates is really, really important. That doesn't make funding any less important, and I think it really is important. And I understand that we are in our long-term plan. There's already been signalled some way of how we may actually need some extra funding there for these zone committees to do some of the work, or how some of the funding pool may be actually reprioritised. So that's work in practice that I understand that we're going to have some more discussion on. Yeah, and really, I'm all for these zone committees getting on with their work and working with all the groups that are in the respective districts.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and put the resolution now because we're running out of time here and we need to get on with it. So all those in favour of the last resolution, which is 3 and 4, please say aye. All those against, please say no. There being nobody, that's carried. Thank you very much, everybody, for all the work you've done on that, especially the staff. It's been fantastic. 9.6, we're up to now. This is the Canterbury Water Management Strategy Management, and this is Claire and Craig. Would one of you like to speak, or both of you?
So, okay, yes, I'll take the paper as read, Madam Chair, and I will be quite short because I think there'll be some discussion around this. And I will share this role with Craig as the other committee member on the regional committee, and he will fill in the feedback that we got at our meeting on Monday from the point of view. So I think really the key points there are outlined in the front pages there, 3 to 6. I think they're really quite pertinent points there around the form, function and structure, and the fact that we've gone through a review of that in the last 3 or 4 months time. I mean, it did seem timely. We were doing a zone committee review as well, just to make sure that our committees were still fit for purpose. You'll see there that our discussions really did favour the retaining the existing functions with some minor tweaks, and they're outlined on page 19, so I won't go through there. In terms of the form, there was certainly a consensus within this council in the freshwater portfolio that we look at resizing the committee just to make it more nimble, and the structure that the form that we're actually looking there is laid out in point 5, so I don't think I really need to probably go through those one by one. And certainly at the end of point 5 there was some other aspects of form that that staff have recommended we adopt, and I'm in agreement with that. At the top of page 156, I just would like to note where we're looking at inviting the Canterbury District Health Board to have a member rather than the current observer position. When we're talking about Canterbury District Health Board, they are the person, or that will be the person that represents both Canterbury and the South Canterbury, and they are one and the same, as I understand it. So it's not about Canterbury and forgetting South Canterbury. With regard to the topic, which is probably going to be the basis of the discussion today, is really around the structure, and that is, is this committee, is the current regional committee going to look like a committee of council going forward, or an independent advisory panel there? So staff have outlined the reasons for their recommendation that it be a committee there on page 159. And I think without going into any discussion at this point in time, I will just leave it as it is, and Craig can probably add to that.
Clear. Yeah, so again, I just want to give some feedback from the regional committee on Tuesday. And to say, of course, another massive piece of work that we've undertaken here. You know, I think it's been at least a year or so since we've been talking about this. And I've had good engagement with the regional committee over this in that time. A number of discussions with them, and had great feedback actually. And Tuesday was no different. A lot of good feedback, and I'm going to take my time actually because I think it's important too. So there you go. So I think the first thing there was definitely some concern from members of the regional committee about removing zone committee reps. So that's just a piece of feedback. But it was largely around wondering how the new committee would have geographic spread, and I think that's a worthwhile point. And the fear that it could become too Christchurch-centric. So I think that's a fair point, and that's acknowledged. And many noted that geographic spread should be a part of the selection criteria for the community reps, as well as the different expertise required. So I think that's fair, and that's something that could be put to staff to consider, and when that goes forward into how that selection criteria is done. There was a particular piece of feedback from the OTOP committee. We received a letter on the day from the committee signed by Lucy Miller, the chair of the committee, and there was a proposal around really supporting, and this is a broad piece of feedback too from the regional committee, and I'm sure from zone committees as well, that there's a real need for a forum for zone committee interaction. So that's something that is acknowledged in our paper, of course, here today, but something that I really wanted to highlight because it's come through really strongly. And the OTOP committee, you know, delved into that a bit and thought that chairs and deputy chairs of zone committees, again, that would be a good forum to be had, and that potentially a zone committee, an overall rep from that forum could sit on the regional committee. So that's what they put to us. So I'm just wanting to put that out there. It would increase another number on the zone committee, on the regional committee. But again, that was just one piece of feedback that I'm giving you here on the day. Others said that it might be good to have more zone committee reps on the regional committee, potentially from the north, mid and south, for example. But again, wasn't widespread discussion. And the other feedback that was really critical was that many see the chair role of the regional committee as being absolutely critical, and noted that that's critical to setting the agenda and maintaining some independence in that monitoring role that the regional committee is there for. And potentially the idea of having co-chairs was discussed or raised. Potentially that could be with one of them being a Naitaru, for example. Anyway, and I don't think, from what I picked up, there wasn't strong feelings one way or the other about the independence versus the committee proposal. Although, as I've said, that role of the chair or the co-chair has been really critical. Funding was another issue that came up, and does the regional committee get its own budget and time and all this sort of stuff? So that was similar feedback around the zone committee stuff as well. And there's some specific feedback about the regional committee really going back to basics and focusing on the CWMS targets, And that should be an item on the agenda at every one of their meetings, and that's what they should be really focusing on. So I thought that was a really good piece of feedback. Also about having more workshops, more working groups, bringing in speakers and expertise, more data and science at the table, and clear actions and focus. And in particular, this will be good for you, Elizabeth, there was mention about Te Mana o Te Wai and really getting stuck into that. The regional committee would like to have a go at that, or the current members would think that's an important thing. Noting that Ngāi Tahu and ECAN will be having those discussions as well, but they think that it's worth having to grapple with a wider portion of the community. Obviously, that focus on CWS targets and first order priorities and cross-catchment issues. And I just, would total what Claire said about the recognition of the South Canterbury District Health Board. I think that's important. And I think Tim on the day took notes about that they should actually be recognised in the terms of reference as well, so that that's clear to everybody that it's not just the Canterbury District Health Board, it's actually both district health boards, although they'll be represented by one person. So yeah, that was just the feedback, and I really endorse and support the work that's been done, and really want to see this moved on and see the regional committee be refreshed. So, kia ora.
Thank you. Now I'll move this, get this resolution moved, and then we'll have the rest of the debate before I let anyone else speak. So I'm going to take this as moved by Councillor Pauling and seconded by Councillor Mackay, that we do 2A, B and C all together. And so any questions? I just want to ask a question about what Craig just said. So Craig, what is the status of all those comments in terms, do you understand from staff notes from that? What's going to happen to that feedback now? Oh, well, that would be interesting. Is there a staff member that could come forward and tell us what would happen with those?
I think that the principal one was around the Canterbury District Health Board, and that's something that we can just make sure that that there aren't official terms of reference, but we can just make sure that that is included. So it includes the South Canterbury District Health Board. The other ones were things that were more comments that don't require any substantial changes unless you choose to make them, which was particularly around zone committee representation on the regional committee.
Well, can I just make a comment here as the chair? I think it would be very good to have those formally noted, since Craig's been involved for a long time and he thinks it's important enough to raise all of that feedback at the council meeting. I think a good process would be to record the Madam Secretary to record that. I'm sure she already has, and we've got it on record anyway, and that we have that as a document that circulates through the rest of the meetings that you have, so you can check against that and see what's happening with that and discuss it more, because they're obviously very important things for the committee level members to see going forward, and we have to make sure that people don't feel that they're getting not action. So I think it would be good to do that. If we could just ask staff to do that, that would be excellent. Thanks very much. And I think they need live feedback into the system. Obviously, yes, Councillor Mackay.
Just a point of clarification. In the fact that we've got in point 5 that it's a proposed, what the proposed committee would look like, and we're accepting a recommendation to adopt the proposed changes, that, as I would understand it, does not preclude us for having a look at what we've got in. Is that correct?
Absolutely, I would say. Is that right, Tim? Yeah, good point. Yeah, that's exactly what. So we need to make sure those things are taken into account. That's what I was indicating. Yeah. All right, so it's moved now, and there's a few people indicating they would like to speak. First of all, Ian, accounts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the preliminary discussions around what to do with the regional council, I've made my
opinion very clear that I don't think there was a future for the regional council. So I want to register. Regional. Well, that's a Freudian slip, isn't it? Yeah. I suspect I believe in both, actually, but I shouldn't say it. Regional committee. And so I'd like to register that I will vote against all three recommendations on that basis. It seems to me that, and I've listened very carefully to Councillor Pauling's recommendations around what the regional committee should be doing, and all those functions sit very clearly with us as councillors. And we are all elected by our constituents to represent their interests in developing, discussing and promoting the CWMS. Te Manaroto Te Wai is an obligation that the Central Freshwater Package puts on us. And it seems to me that having a committee which is not accountable to constituents in a time now where we have a fully elected council, it seems to me to be totally inappropriate when they are repeating all the same work that we have to do anyway. I'm also conscious of the fact that they're costing the regional council something like $80,000 a year, which I would rather put into something more into funding something more useful. And so, yeah, for those reasons, I just want to register my opposition to any continuing of the regional committee in any form.
Thank you, Councillor. The next person is Councillor Liz McKenzie.
So I would also like to speak against this proposal and would like to support what Councillor McKenzie has said. I do not see value in having this trimmed down committee. I feel it is a vanity committee. I did see value in having a totally independent advisory group. And so, you know, to me, I don't sort of, you know, there's a letter of expectation from us to the committee. I don't see value in that. It should be around the other way. The committee should be holding us to account. So I will be voting against this proposal.
Thank you, Councillor McKenzie. The next person on this speaking list is Councillor Grant Edge.
Yeah, I have similar views. The last time I recall that we talked about this, we were heading down the direction of an independent advisory panel without councillors being involved in it. An advisory panel to just almost check up on what we're doing and provide expert advice. By putting it into a committee with a selection of 6 community members with specific experience, I'm thinking, what does that mean? Surely that's the same thing as expert scientific advisory advice. So, yeah, I just, you know, gone through all of this process, and it seems to me to be contrary to earlier discussions that and direction that this council was giving to the staff, and it just seems odd to me. So yeah, I'm not really in favour of another committee, and I think the role is an advisory one.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Look, I'm in favour of a regional committee, a chopped down version of the regional committee on with a couple of riders. I think it needs to have a harder edge to it than what it has had and provide a better service, I think, across Takiwā. But in doing that, I don't think, and I'm a great regional representation here, and I said yesterday about our our level of service 33 about creating a committee. We need to, you know, creating what was it? Help me out here, Chair. A people's forum, yeah, people's forum. And I said, you know, what about the people from Cattle Creek and Hard and all those sorts of things? I don't believe this committee needs that sort of representation across our region. I think it needs some people that are smart, that can give us the right advice, that feel rewarded for coming into the room and doing something. I think the health board thing is a real must. I mean, I think Alistair Humphreys, in terms of his input to some of the stuff, especially around fresh water, especially about where we're going now with free waters, is vital. I don't always agree with the way Alistair thought about things when I was part of the regional committee, but he was always topical in terms of the way he representative. So I disagree that we should do away with this. I think we don't want to throw this away. I think it can serve a purpose, but I think we need to concentrate on who is there to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Southworth.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to distinguish between scientific experts that you might bring in through consultancy and the expertise that sits around the regional committee. And I feel there's a difference in that the people that come to the regional committee have a sort of deep knowledge of the CWMS, but also strong connection to the local communities. And that's very different from a paid consultant that comes in. So for me, that gives value. And I think with the slimmed down version, there's a real opportunity to use that expertise and be quite focused. I would agree with Liz, with Councillor Mackenzie in terms of the letter of expectation. I also suggested it would be great to have a letter come to the Environment Canterbury. I think the value of this committee would be to hold us to account, to point out where we're perhaps not doing as well as we could. And a letter of expectation to the council would be a way of acknowledging that. Perhaps it's a two-way thing. And so for me, I think I'm leaning towards the independent advisory panel option where we can have that. There's a choice there. A councillor can or may not sit on the committee that you have. You can be there as an observer if the regional committee would welcome that. But I feel like it should be their choice, and that opportunity to have complete independence, but still provide that level of knowledge and community value.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak? Councillor Megan Hands.
Yeah. Look, I am happy with the recommendation as it reads. I appreciate Councillor Mackenzie's comments around the usefulness of the committee, around now that we have a fully elected council, what is the role for the committee and the likes. But I think on balance, the interaction that we have with the community via the regional committee is still of value, and there are good people there. But like the zone committees, we've had that previous conversation, is ensuring that the regional committee does have good direction in terms of what we're asking of them, and any advisory feedback to provide through to us. I am supportive of being a committee of council on the basis that there is clear provisions within the Local Government Act for that, in terms of processes, in terms of appointments, in terms of discharge, all of those kinds of things. I think it's cleaner and clearer, and for that reason I support that option. It may be that in time we see a shift somewhat in alignment with what Ian has mentioned, but I don't think the time is now. I am, as everyone here knows, I do hold the Canterbury Water Management Strategy dear to my heart, and I do feel that piece by piece our commitment to it is being dismantled very quietly, and there are a number of members around this council table who don't perhaps share the strength of the Canterbury Water Management Strategy and in as high a stead as what previous members of regional councils around this table and commissioners did, and that our community does, particularly our rural community does. So I would like to see that those people that are on the regional committee within our zone committees do still have the opportunity to show us the value of the Canterbury Water Management Strategy and remind us why we are here in the wider context of that document and that strategy that's held up by the Mayoral Forum for our council beyond our regulatory function. So for that reason, I fully support this. I look forward to seeing the terms of reference in the letter of shared priorities, because I think that's when we'll sort out some of those questions and issues about the function of the committee and the advice it can bring back to us. So I look forward to that then. But I think the proposal is a good one in terms of form and structure.
Thank you. I'll ask Councillor Craig and Councillor Clare just to reply in a minute. Does anybody else want to speak? Oh, yes, Councillor Sunkel.
Thank you. I guess I was initially in favour of the independent position, but in the conversations that we've had, I have come to the point where I happily accept the recommendations that we have in front of us. One of the concerns I guess I had was there was maybe a wee bit of a loss of connection from the regional committee back into the territorial authorities and the zone committees. But with everything that we have in place, I'm comfortable with the recommendations that we have on the paper.
1 minute for Craig. Would you like to say anything?
Yeah, kia ora. I think it's been a really great discussion. Thanks everyone for their feedback and other points of view. I really do see value in this refreshed regional committee with a revised focus and a bit of a re-energisation. And good to point out too that there was no opposition throughout the process of removing the TLA because I think there was acknowledgement that we have those gov-to-gov meetings now with the fully elected council here and the other forums that are out there. So, I think the regional committee, as we can see it in the future, would be an evolution and a step forward. It's definitely not to the other extreme, but I agree with Megan that that might come in time with a refreshed regional committee. So, yeah, I really support what we've done. We've got to. It's been a big task, but I think it's worthy of support and giving it a go.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay.
Mine's very, very quick, Madam Chair. Look, I mean, I think I agree. I hear all the comments that have been made, even for those who, from those that also want an advisory a panel and the WISE board. But I really do think that the context has changed a little bit with the fully elected council and the usefulness of the regional committee. We must make sure that whatever they do is very useful. I think that Vicky's so right in pointing out that the CWMS is still at the heart of this, and we need people that can have a good understanding of that, or willing to get a good understanding of it, and have wide connections and can represent the community as well. And I think that the other thing, that some of the concerns that people have can certainly be addressed when we look at the terms, developing up the terms of reference. So very supportive of the recommendation that's put for it to be a committee.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. I'll put it to the vote. All those people in favour, please say aye. All those against, please say no. Does anybody want their vote against noted? Yes, Councillor Mackenzie would like theirs voted, and Councillor Grant Edge would like his noted as well. Anybody else? No one else voted against. I didn't notice. Okay, thank you very much. That's all passed, and we're moving on now to Community Water Partnerships Charter. I'll speak to this one. This is a charter that's being set up or initiated through to the City Council's communities and the Zone Committee and staff's involvement with water across the city over a number of years. There are a number of charters working across the city. My experience is that the charters, once they're signed by a number of organisations, really work really well, and people are very committed to them, undertaking out to the terms of reference that they agree to in the charter. It means that you bring some official level other organisations in. It also is a very good structure for community groups that are already working out there in water care, but new groups to also come forward, and a good way of communicating with the community in general. We've already indicated to the City Council that we will sign this. There was a bit of trouble when we initially put it up around what was going to happen in terms of the forward going process. They weren't quite ready for us to do it then. They are now. And we're going to sign it off on a ceremony on the early in 2021, which is in February, I think. I'm proposing that the person who signs on our behalf is Councillor Marshall. Which I'm going to move the resolutions, and I'm going to suggest that she is the one. It's very important going forward. I think it'll be a long-term charter, as many of them are in our city, and they do work that slowly just becomes part of the general work of everyone. I think it's a really good move. So I want to move, agrees that the council, regional council, be a partner and a signatory to the Community Water Partnership Charter, and appoints Councillor Nicole Marshall as the Canterbury Regional Council representative to sign or has got to delegate to sign on behalf of the council the Community Waters Partnership Charter at a public event in July. That would be seconded by Councillor Peter Scott. Is there any discussion or questions? First of all, questions. Okay, discussion. Yeah, discussions.
Thank you, Chair Huey, for the nomination.
I feel very proud to be nominated on behalf of our council. Like you, I believe this partnership has the opportunity to deliver great things. And even though I acknowledge that the partnership has come out of the city's stormwater consent, it's going to be very explicit in our role as not doing their consent delivery for them. It's working in partnership while they deliver their consent.
Clearwater.
Look, I'm very happy to support this too, and the nomination for Nicole to be the person to sign. I understand that quite a few community groups are going to be there too, supporting it all, so it'll be a great launch, I guess. I think this is probably one of the most important relationships that we will have as a council with another council, and long may it last. We've all heard cries, particularly say from Federated Farmers, that we at ECAN and the city have to make sure we clean up our waterways. And I think this is a way forward. And it's interesting though it's taken a fair while. I see the zone committee that I'm now on asked for this about 18 months ago, but at least now it is happening. We're able to form that relationship with City Council. And I know that their staff and their councillors are committed to making sure this works too. There's just so much we can do, and that this partnership will do in terms of how in fact the state of the waterways are monitored and reported against the four wellbeings and that kind of thing. So I think I'm sure we'll get a clear framework of reference as to how the group operates. The other key part too, obviously, is how in fact, and I mentioned that other community groups are involved with waterways. It's just how there's a great opportunity for us and for our engagement people to really engage with community groups. So there are so many doing so much. So I see this as having great potential to really, I guess, work with the people.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clearwater. Councillor.
Yeah, thank you for bringing this paper, and I'm really excited to see it here. And also, it's got a positive vibe to it. I know that community groups are really, really pleased to see this come to council, and will be really pleased to see us get behind it. It responds to a real desire amongst our communities to see an improvement in waterways, and that this will enable, I think, what's a latent potential in those communities to actually make a difference. It's about enabling the different groups to see a common vision and to have common objectives and work really strategically and collaboratively to be more efficient and effective at getting to where we all want to be. And so I think for me, it's that real connection with community groups and seeing us as councils working together to support them. It's fantastic to see. So thank you.
All right. Oh, sorry, I didn't turn it on. I turned it off, I think. I just think, look, we need to be working in that grey area. I don't mean grey water. In the grey area on the rivers in Christchurch and the estuary, because we need to just work all together in the city. The need is urgent to fix our water, and we need to do something to improve the water quality, particularly in our rivers. Celebrate what's already been done. Get alongside all those groups, and all the politicians elected in the city should be working on this. And I think it's fantastic. So I'd like to put it to the vote. All those people in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? No, that's good. It's carried. Thank you very much. Now, just to let you know that before we go into public excluded, I'm going to make us have a break for a minute. So don't worry, we're getting near there. So we're up to 9.8. This is our paper on the Tumu Taiao Mana Whenua experts, appointments to committees. I'll speak to this. As you all know, that under the rules of the legislation, we can appoint the Tumu Taiao people to our committees, and we are very pleased to be able to do that. And it's fantastic that you can come on there and that you can have a vote. So while we're working on other strategies to get you a vote, this is one we can do at the moment. And the Regulation and Hearings Committee, we would like to appoint Yvette to that one, Tumu Taiao Yvette Couch-Lewis, and to the Performance Audit and Risk Committee, we would like to invite Tumu Taiao Ian Cranwell to join us on that excellent committee under the leadership of Councillor Sunkel. Who would like to second it? Councillor Pauling. I don't know whether you can. You be the one chosen because there's no. I saw you first. Other people are putting their hand up because they want to speak. So we could have questions or speaking now. Who would like to? Ian. Oh, you're right.
I thought you were looking for a second. Yeah. I don't want to speak. I support the motion.
I totally support everything, but just the first background line says that council established the roles. And at that meeting, we had a very lengthy discussion around the wording. So it wasn't that council was establishing the roles because we can't employ people aside from the CE. So I'm just raising concern again with that phrasing because we can't have roles aside from the CE. And we talked a lot at that council meeting around appropriate phrasing, and to me this has lost it. But yeah, I totally endorse the recommendations, but I just want to raise issue with that.
Where is that?
The first line too. I just want to make sure we don't get in trouble with anyone. As much as I love you both,
idea. Thank you. This is an invite by Huranui District Council for us to join the group that they've set up, a working group. It's to confirm our representatives to a working group that they are setting up. And the resolution actually confirms that. So this isn't actually, and unfortunately, I think what's happened is the heading should say appointment to join them or something like that. It's not, we don't actually, it doesn't say in there we're establishing a group. We're just sending these people off to work with Huranui, which I think is a fantastic idea, and it's really good that they've asked us to do it. So there's a resolution there that I will move as it is written on under number 1. Would somebody like to second that? Seconded by Councillor Ian Mackenzie. Would anybody like to ask any questions or speak to this? Councillor Edge.
Just speaking to this, yeah, I had, being a North Canterbury councillor, I had suggested that it might be a good idea for me to also be part of this working group, trying to find a new and forward way for the Huranui community. But obviously, my name isn't forwarded on this. But and I know that the previous terms of reference that we had, and that we've just talked about in another matter, were not acceptable to the community. So they're wanting to come and find a new direction. And that's why I thought my role on that working group might be useful, both as a North Canterbury councillor, chair of the North Canterbury Biosecurity Advisory Group, council representative on the post-quake farming group, and recent engagement with the Huranui dryland group. All of those people involved in those groups are trying to find ways and different ways of doing things. So I think I could have contributed to this working group, but I think it's really important that going forward, that in a situation like this, the local councillors, no matter where they are actually given priority to be involved with these kind of working groups, especially where it's within their communities, and they know their communities. But anyway, I'll continue on to help the best I can to resolve some of these issues that we're finding in Huranui through these other groups that I'm working on.
Thank you, Councillor Edge. Councillor Phil Clearwater.
It saddens me that we cannot, in this point, really work as a democratically elected council, so that a democratically elected member is not able to be part of a working group in his own constituency. I think it's poor that this council are making a decision and recommendation like this, and I will vote against it.
Yeah, like Councillor Clearwater, I'm very worried about the precedent that this sets, excluding a councillor when he is in this ward. I feel is discriminatory, and I feel that it's based simply because that person might have environmentalist views. So I will be voting against this motion likewise.
Sorry, I haven't got my speaker on. Councillor Ian Mackenzie.
I reply to point out that in fact the precedent's already been set, because Councillor Pauling sits on the Southern District Council Liaison Committee and on the Te Waihora Co-Governance Group, which are both in my constituency, and even more councillors' uncles. And I have to say I don't lose a lot of sleep over that, because I have faith in Councillor Pauling.
I'm not sure why you're giving yourself a right of reply. But anyway, you did. Oh, you seconded it. You did. All right, you could have one then. So anybody else wanting to speak? Councillor, who's speaking? Who? Councillor Southworth and then Councillor Hands.
Yeah, I feel that when a councillor's committee is being set up with a number of places on this committee, that those councillors who are in that area should really be given first choice. And if they choose not to stand, or there's a good reason why not, and that should be discussed, then you know, that's fair enough. But I do feel like there should be a first choice goes to those councillors in that constituency.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hands, 1 minute.
I think there's a couple of things to this, and I would just comment on Ian's comment around a precedent already being set. With that, in terms of appointing people to committees across Canterbury, regardless of where we're elected from, and I think we swear an oath to this, to the entire region, not just to the wards that we come from. I think where we can involve more councillors, particularly where there are relationship issues from our council, you know, the more people we have working with those communities, the more chance we have of strengthening our relationship with those communities. And as Grant's talked about, he's talked about him being involved in lots of those other groups already. And I've no doubt that the councillors that the freshwater portfolio has nominated, because we did have a conversation about this at the portfolio level as well, we'll be able to continue to work with Grant and talk about what groups he's on and how that all of those things can be linked together. So we know we've had some issues with relationships in the Hurunui. I think it's important that we have a clear focus on improving those and having as many councillors from diverse backgrounds that allows for the forming and strengthening of relationships with the North Canterbury community, I think is a good thing. It's unfortunate that Grant feels he's been excluded there, but I think it's about a strengthening and a lifting of the priority. Excuse me, Phil, it's not nice for you to speak while I'm speaking like that. I think it's good that we can have more people involved with this community, particularly when we've got some thorny issues here.
I think your 1 minute's up now. Thanks. And everyone's only got 1 minute at the moment. You're not next, Phil. Yeah, and you are.
Okay, I just want to speak about significance and engagement 8 and 9. Just a point of clarification, just on, you know, it talks to the Runanga know regarding that the committee, that the Hurunui Waiau Zone Committee will be disestablished, and also has the Hurunui District Council started their engagement with the Runanga regarding this?
Well, I don't know the answer, but we can ask Carolyn if she knows. Carolyn, do you know the answer?
Yes, the zone committee itself, which includes the Runanga representatives, has been advised about the process that the Runanga District Council is going down, but they haven't yet formally engaged with Runanga on the proposal. One of the agenda items that they had asked be on the first meeting with a subgroup of Environment Canterbury councillors was their proposal around the terms of reference, but how they might best engage with Ngāi Tahu on this issue.
On that, so I mean, you're forming a committee, but you're going to meet. So the group is going to meet before the Ngaitos or the Runanga brought in. I thought they'd be brought in into that committee to this first meeting, correct?
At the moment, my understanding is that that's not where the Hurunui District Councillors are thinking in terms of sequence.
I've had a number of conversations with the mayor about this, so we just have to go with the flow a little bit here. I understood that the Runanga were totally informed about it, but through the first discussions. So maybe we'll just, we'll just take that on board. And I'll take that on board. So Phil, were you indicating you want to speak again?
Look, clearly this is, to say this is contentious is an understatement. Can I just suggest in the circumstances that we actually take this off the agenda and reconsider it at a later date? I think at this time of goodwill, it would be a nice thing if councillors would agree to that, just to rediscuss it and think it through.
Oh, well, I'm going to say, I'm going to just keep going. We're not going to do that because I think we just should go ahead. I'd just like to round it up, and I'm not going to have any more speakers, by saying that my practice right from the start has been to very much involve the councillors from the wards in their, especially the rural people, in what's going on in their wards. So if someone contacts me, I regularly contact them straight away. And if they feel that one's getting invited and one's not, I try to fix it. The original decisions that were made around the zone committee and things like that, that was negotiated between all the councillors, with some thing about the chair having the role to try and decide those, which actually is in the handbook for mayors and chairs. I tried to make it so everybody had a say and talk to everybody and get a whole joint thing around it. In case you don't recall, that is actually what happened. With this is a short-term situation, because the Hurunui have been talking, the mayor's been talking to me extensively about it. We need to get some focus here and get it done. I think that this is unfortunate, but I wouldn't want this to distract from us actually working with Hurunui. I've had a good discussion with Councillor Edge about it, and I think the best way here is to go forward, and we'll all try and work together on this. So I'm going to put it to the vote. All those people, I've moved it, haven't I? And seconded it with all those people in favour, please say aye. All those against, please say so. Okay, so record, please. Record. Elizabeth McKenzie. Anybody else? Vicky? And Grant Edge is going to abstain. And do you want any comments noted, Grant, or anything with what you said earlier? No. Well, it's not usually abstain. That's not normal practice, so I'll have to ask staff professional advice about that. So who else is here? You're abstaining, Tane? Okay, Tane. Vicky's voting against. So we have Grant abstaining, Tane abstaining, Vicky, Phil and Elizabeth being noted as voting against. All right, so we're moving on. Thank you very much. We're on page 174, Emergency Committee. I'm doing this one. This is normal practice for councillors over the break. We did this last year. The exact same people are going to be on this one, if you all agree. There will be Councillor John Sunkel, Councillor Peter Scott and Councillor Jenny Huey. And hopefully there won't be any emergencies over the summer, so I'll move that. Seconded by Councillor Peter Scott. All those in favour, please say aye.
Sorry, it should be not me to vote on it.
I'll move it.
Members of the not the appointees.
Move it by Councillor Ian McKenzie, seconded by Councillor Claire Mackay. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against? No one against. It's carried. Now, we're just going to have an adjournment of the meeting now, so you can all go to the toilet. We can have a bit of a...
Madam Chair.
Oh, well, I've just forgotten about that. We'll do that in a minute.
Madam Chair, can I just take 20 seconds of our time?
Yes, you can.
Because I think, excuse me, because I think when we go into public excluded, we might lose some people out of this room, and I don't want that to happen. Yeah. But I just want to say how absolutely disappointed I am in Cindy. Because she's leaving us. And like, you joined us in 2016, and I can
I can vividly record the first time I met you because I went and asked Bill a question. He said like this. He went, "Oh, Cindy, like this," and you're a bit like Bill actually when I got my answer from you. But Cindy, you really have been. Cindy, you really have been a lot of glue in terms of government services when you were here, and then you spent that time in the Chathams, which was awesome for you and your whānau, and then you came back. We thought we would have you forever, but obviously the whakatane is calling, and you've got a very good position to go to up there. And we wish you all the best. We're not going to see you again because I think you're leaving on the 15th of January, but we are going to miss you. So I'd just like everyone to give a bit of applause to Cindy.
I think it's fantastic you're going back to your family and your whānau and, you know, everything else where you want to go. It's great for you. But I want to tell everybody about how the skills that Cindy has of governance are getting rarer and rarer in our collective local government whānau throughout New Zealand. One of the sad reasons that they're getting scarce is that there's been a lot of restructures in our organisations and people haven't valued, you know, every council secretary used to be a man, and when he was a man, he reported directly to the CEO. Nobody did anything in councils without going through the secretariat, and that was the machinery of the council. That's how it worked properly. And I can know that Miles can back me up on that because he started out on one of these people. The great people in councils have started out knowing how the machinery of local government works. It's a whole skill that change agents see as admin and low-level women's work. So if you don't believe me, you can see there's papers written about this. It's been downgraded in councils throughout New Zealand. And who's there now? Lots of women. Their salary's downgraded and the position has no status. Now, if you want to have proper democracy, which you're supposed to under the Local Government Act and all the rules in New Zealand, we need to think about how we're going to skill up these people for the future. Because there is no training course at universities or anywhere. There's been a long conversation about that and it hasn't gone anywhere. So I just want, and there are people out there that you can still find, but they're very scarce and it's because they're not valued. Well, I totally value your work and likewise Louise's work. The council secretary is one of the most important people in the council and they keep it going and they keep us on track and they are fantastic to elected members. They're this council member that knows how to treat us fantastic because they are about continuance of democracy. So I'm really sorry you're going, but they are so lucky to get you and have a good journey and thanks very much. Now we can give you a clap. And now I'd like to stand up and again, because before you go, we have to say something about Nadine, because this is her last council that she's going to be at here before she goes. No, she's not going to be here at a council meeting. So I want to say that Nadine is a treasure. She's fantastic to work with. I really love working with you. Now I'm going to cry. I'm sorry I didn't cry for you, Cindy. But I'm warming up towards crying. It's been great to get a relationship with you and you, Cindy. And I just really admire your skills. I think you're fantastic. I think you'll do lots for New Zealand Inc. So I'm real thrilled that you're going to environment because we need to do something about the environment. And I'm probably tired now from doing this all day, but that doesn't help. But anyway, I'll be watching what you do because it's really important to mentor a woman like you. So if you want to come back or see me anytime when I'm not crying, I hope I've got some wise words to share with you. And I know you'll keep working in the knowledge of regional government, and I think it'll be fantastic for New Zealand Inc. So now I'll hand over to someone who probably won't cry.
I think it's very powerful to have emotion, and Jenny, that's fantastic. And there's absolutely no reason to apologize for crying. It's genuine and it's from the heart. What more could really be said? Nadine, I think I was on a call the other day where I gave you grief and said, I will never forgive you for resigning. It has been an absolute privilege to work with you. This organization is so much the better for so many contributions you have made. And I know that there's consensus around this council table and throughout our organization for your talent, your ability to see into the future and bring us to that. You have an ability to actually have the strategy and the process for getting there. And you have grown many people in this organization. You give of yourself unreservedly. And what I wish you is not only well at MFE, because I know you will shine, but I wish you well in your heart and your own personal journey from here on out. Thank you so much.
Coming back, we've got item 9.11 on page 176. And this is the work of people in governance and Louise around setting up the council timetable and schedule for next year. It's not an easy job. You'll move it. Councillor Peter Stott will move it, seconded by Councillor John Sunkel. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? No, thank you. That's included. Now we've got to just take instructions from Louise for a minute.
The late items.
The late item.
And there's a sheet circulated separately. There's a procedural motion that we need to receive the late item and also to consider that with the public excluded because of privacy for people.
Yeah.
So all we're doing in the open part is receiving the report and resolving to consider some public excluded. Then we'll go on to the discussion on the item about the dams.
But we go on to public excluded, we'll do it all neatly together. All right, so the first resolution is to accept this late other business, which is the appointment of the independent members. Receive and consider at the council meeting on the 10th of December the report. Second, that the report be considered with the public excluded on the grounds of protection of privacy of natural persons. You'll see that their CVs are basically on there. So I'll move that. I can probably just move that from the chair. All those in favour, please say aye. Oh, second to Councillor Clearwater put his hand up. Water, I'm calling him now. Clearwater. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? No, thank you. That's carried. Okay, now we're going to item 9.4. You have to find 9.4. 131. Okay, so this is, that's lovely that you've come to the table, the proposed transfer of the Building Act consent functions for large dams. So we'll just ask you to speak to the report. That'd be great. Thank you, Nadine and Catherine.
Tēnā koutou, thank you, councillors. As the chair has outlined, that the purpose of this paper is to ask the council to accept the transfer in relation to the Building Act functions for large dams, and that's outlined in recommendation number 1 in terms of the specific sections of the Building Act. And specifically, we're being asked on behalf of the Otago Regional Council, the West Coast Regional Council and Southland Regional Council. So there's just a few items that I just draw council's attention to. First and foremost, this is a function that the council already maintains as part of its own functions. So we have been administering the BCA function for large dams on behalf of the Canterbury Regional Council for a number of years now and been through a number of subsequent audits. In terms of the specific request from our partner council to take on this function on their behalf, this has also been a piece of work or a discussion that's been ongoing for around 5 years. And specifically, point number 18 in the paper speaks to I guess the important link that Environment Canterbury has in terms of our neighbour councils. And so there is a really strong argument outlined in the recommendations and in the paper relating to efficiency. We already maintain this function, we administer this function, we have been really successful in all of our audits in relation to this function. And so therefore, on behalf of the South Island councils, they've asked us to take on this function. It's worth noting that this is just the BCA function in relation to large dams. It's not, of course, any of the RMA matters that would reside with those councils. The other points that I'd just like to point out to the council, the key points really summarise the case. In particular, point number 5, in doing so, this will also enable a more efficient service delivery for ourselves and for the South Island. We already maintain staff, as pointed out in item or point number 6. And importantly, just in terms of context across the country, point number 17 speaks to that there's a similar arrangement in existence in the North Island with the Waikato Regional Council. So on that note, I just bring to the table the specific recommendations outlined on the front page about asking the council to take on this function as outlined in point number 1, agreeing that the transfer is desirable on the grounds of efficiency, technical and special capability for the reasons set out in the paper. Thirdly, agrees to enter into a contractual arrangement, i.e. a deed of transfer with each of the specific regional councils, providing for a number of items that seek to mitigate specifically any risk to this particular council. And 4, delegates to the Chief Executive the authority to authorise the final terms. So on that matter, I'll leave it and just open up for any questions for yourself, the Chair.
Thank you very much, Nadine. Are there any questions? Councillor Peter Scott.
You need a move or a second.
I'll move or a second. Yeah. All right, you move it. Moved by Councillor Scott, seconded by Councillor Mackay. Just open it up to any questions. Yes, Yvette.
Kia ora, and thank you for that summary, going over the key points in relation to what the staff are actually asking today in terms of their recommendations, in terms of agreeing to looking at these contractual agreements. I guess can I just say up front first, I'm not questioning the council's ability to be able to carry out this task. I agree with the staff and the report in terms of that they are already undertaking that role and looking at the relationship across the councils. I think though that, and also to being within a briefing hearing as well, my mistake, in the briefing discussion here at the table on the dam situation, my first one coming in. My question that I asked about the definition around small is really coming down to a change of language that is actually used within the report that brings about a question within the document that I'm actually reading. So it's not actually saying that I do not think that there is that the council, in terms of their liability, all I'm doing is asking for an assurance in terms of the risk and liability, in terms of the responsibility of signing up on these contractual agreements, given that the definition of small can be misinterpreted across, and then given, so the question I asked this morning was looking at future development when looking at dams and the response and the legal liability that could come onto the council in terms of the increase of storage, and was that a consideration? Because I personally, and that's why I asked the question, that was there will be an increase in terms of, so my definition of small could have been different to your interpretation of small. So mine was more around a clarification, not actually saying that the council should or should not, or their incapacity to be able to do so, but just reassurance of the responsibility of this table and taking on that risk and liability in terms of future moving forward.
Kia ora, thank you. It is worth clarifying the use of that terminology. I thank you for that. And so specifically in point number 33, we're really just talking about small in the context of the number of applications that would be received in the past. So what it says here is, so the Waikato, for example, has received 6 applications in the last 12 months. This regional council has received, I think, 3 applications recently. So we would, and there is a point where I think, in the paper we refer to that we would anticipate that the number of applications received would be between 3 and 6. So it's of that magnitude. So just really want to clarify, you're exactly right, we're not using the word small in any other context, but only in relation to the number of applications. You did raise another point in relation to storage. I want to clarify that the function of the BCA that is being asked to be transferred to this council is only in relation to the Building Act and the dam safety provisions. We wouldn't, of course, be taking on any of the RMA functions in relation that would reside with the council within which those that application may have been made. So those 2 points, and then on the matter of the liability and the risk, I'll hand over to our legal counsel.
It's perhaps appropriate that a full conversation around the liability exposure to the council be in a public excluded session. But perhaps it's worth, as a preliminary point, noting that large dams, and it's only large dams for which building consent's required, and therefore only large dams for which we're proposing this transfer take place, are all dams where the height of the dam is more than 4 metres or the volume is more than 20,000 cubic metres. I've had a good chat to our BCA coordinator today to understand what sort of dams we're talking about, and they are predominantly irrigation dams. They're not Clyde dams, and perhaps that gives you some comfort. 4 metres is relatively high. It's probably the height of this chamber, and 20,000 cubic metres is a chunk of water, but it's not one of those massive, typically the dams for which we're processing consents currently, and for which we anticipate to continue to process consents if council agrees, are at the small end of large. The other thing I would note.
Totally, and it's actually those smaller ones that I'm thinking of. And knowing under the transfer with the Building Act, what I'm wanting to clarify is that the actual building of that structure, the RMA, looks after like the capacity, and should there be a break within there and the capacity to be able to hold that, the responsibility of the council will be in the actual structure of building that dam to be able to go to the next phase. And that's why you go to the organisation, so it slips my mind, and I'm not going to go looking through paper, to be able to get the experts in terms of the dams. What I'm wanting to make sure is that within the risk and liability area, that when that building consent responsibility is handed over, that there is no liability that would take us into the next phase. If there should be a dam break, if there should be a crack within, and that's why I asked the question, within future, because of irrigation and the size, because they do, in terms of the rural area, the damage that could happen. And I'm just hoping that through that transfer of that document, there is no liability on us, that it stays within the RMA process. That's really what I'm looking at, within that process. I think I've got it right. I think I have. If I'm wrong, then fine, but that's mainly what I'm looking for.
May I suggest that might be an opportune time or a piece of conversation that's best had in a public excluded session? Unless perhaps there are other questions.
Just a word of advice after that lovely speech I can earlier about my role. What I suggest, yes, what I suggest we do, councillors, just to tidy up, and it's been a long day, is go to page 179 for the existing recommendation to go into public excluded. And we'll add to that, first of all, the reasons for going into public excluded for the appointment of the independent members to PAR, which you've seen the clause from the Lagoima Act. And we'll add to that for this process that will go into public excluded to consider the rest of this report, which for the reason in the Act that we're going to seek legal advice. So are you happy for that recommendation on page 179 as amended to go into public excluded?
Yes. Seconded by Councillor. Who seconded? Craig. Councillor Craig Pauling. Everyone in favour? Good. That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Louise. Yeah. Consent functions for large dams. We're going to the recommendation. I would like a mover and a seconder. Did we have one already?
We probably do.
Whoever they were, they moved and seconded it. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? No, there's no one against. That's carried. Thank you very much. Rightio. Let's have this bit about which ones are moving in and out of.
We're just reconfirm. We confirm an open meeting the appointment of the independent members and the 2 extra members to PAR.
All right. Did you hear that? Who would like to move that? Moved by Vicky Southworth, seconded by Craig Pauling. All those in favour, please say aye.
Sorry, Vicky can't.
Oh, Vicky can't. She can't. Can we have to move to who? Grant. Grant. He's got his hand up. Grant Edge, seconded by Craig Pauling. All those in favour, please say aye. That's carried. Thank you very much. Anything else we have to do?
Just wrap through the notice of motion other business.
The notice of motion around other business, there is none. There's no other business. There's no questions, and I'm on the wrong page, so I have to look at yours. And we'll have a karakia to finish. Would not yes. Would you like to do that, Craig? Oh, yeah.
First of all, awesome. Good day. Thank you for joining us for the last bit. Yeah. Oh, we've got dinner tonight, so looking forward to that as well. So, right, karakia whakamutinga o tātou nei hui, kia tau, ngā manaakitanga o ngā me karo, ki runga ki tēnā o tātou, kua mahia, kua makiki, kia tua te reo, kia tua te mana, kia tua te aroha, tūturi whakamoa, kia tīna, haumie, hui e, ki e, hold it.